Mike's not. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The regular meeting of the Grosse Ile Township Planning Commission will come to order. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on our agenda, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda that any commissioners would like to make? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion, please, to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Motion from Rathel, support.
Support.
Support from Ranka. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. The agenda stands. Next item are the minutes from the January 17th Planning Commission meeting. Were there any comments, additions, corrections to those minutes? Hearing no comment, I'll entertain a motion to approve as submitted.
So moved.
Motion from Jay, support from Rathel. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Minutes are approved. Brittany, as usual, nice job. We appreciate. Get organized here for a second. Okay. Just one moment while I find the right piece of paper. That's interesting.
Let's see.
How about you? That makes things a little more difficult.
Brian might have to do some work tonight.
There we go. Okay, we're all set. We're going to move to the first item of business, which is a special land use site plan review, including a public hearing for the Fresh Start Center. The applicant is the Fresh Start Center, 23800 Northwestern Highway, Suite 110. That's in Southfield. And speaking for the applicant is Mr. Lawrence Opalewski. He is attorney for the Dalton Tomich firm in Detroit. The location of the application is legally is Lot A, Supervisor's Grosse Ile Plat number 30. The common description is 23285 Meridian. And this is a single-family residence. It's on the southeast corner of Meridian and Ferry. The proposal. The applicant is proposing to use the residence for a religious retreat center. The retreats are small with 4 to 5 attendees and 3 staff. Each session runs for 7 days, and there are approximately 2 retreats maximum per month. Fresh Start is specifically for Jewish clients who have suffered emotional trauma and lost their faith. The retreat staff uses counseling, therapies, and Jewish teachings to help clients to heal and to restore their faith. The zoning is R1B, single-family residential. I'd like to share a little background on this. From an ordinance perspective, there is a list of non-standard uses in the residential districts that are allowed as special land uses. A religious retreat center is not specifically listed. There is, however, a special land use ordinance provision that allows a similar use to be identified and applied. In this case, the township staff worked with the applicant to determine that the closest similar use was a church in our ordinance because of the Jewish religious elements in the retreat sessions. The ordinance definition of church is very broad. It is, quote, any structure wherein persons regularly assemble for religious activity, unquote. On this basis, Fresh Start applied for the special land use approval as a church under this definition. And this is the basis for the Planning Commission review tonight. The relevant ordinances for this are Article 3, single-family residential, specifically Section 3.3C, which addresses church standards. Article 21, site plan review, and Article 22, special land use review are also applied. The review process for this application is multi-step. The Planning Commission makes a special land use recommendation to the Township Board. The Township Board is the final decision maker on the special land use. The Planning Commission is final authority on the site plan. The Planning Commission will be addressing both the special land use and site plan details tonight. The zoning ordinances define an additional required approval step that may come into play depending upon the Planning Commission decisions tonight. Specifically, the dimensional setback standards from the property lines for a church are significantly more than for a single-family residence. The Planning Commission will review the setbacks at the residence and decide if a ZBA variance is needed. If so, then the Planning Commission will table the special land use and site plan application and forward it on to the ZBA. This is a requirement in the ordinances. The application will then come back to the Planning Commission at a future date for the special land use approval or denial and the site plan approval or denial, with the special land use is actually the recommendation to the board. I expect that the Planning Commission will vote on this tonight, and I expect that due to the details that we're going to present, that we will likely table this evening, and we will vote also to the fact that that ZBA will need to be involved in this process. This will all kind of play out as we get into the materials and find out what direction we ultimately need to go. The meeting procedure, given the unique nature of this application, the review tonight will be a little bit different from our standard practice. We're going to ask the applicant, Mr. Opolszewski, to speak first and to summarize the Fresh Start application. This will give us all the details that we need to know. We will then bring it back to the table and ask questions from the Planning Commission. We will then move to our planner, Brian, who will then educate us on the special land use and site plan standards that are applicable here. And, of course, we'll then have a discussion with Brian. Following that, when all the information is out, we will open this up to the public as a public hearing. We will listen to all the input that everybody wants to share. At completion of that, we will bring it back to the table, and the Planning Commission will then process the information that we have received. So that's the background and the process and the ordinances. Planning Commissioners, do you have any questions on what we're going to be doing tonight? Clear? Okay. Well, on that note, I would like to ask our applicant to step forward, Mr. Opolszewski. Welcome to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Larry Opolszewski. I represent the applicant. I do have a short presentation for you regarding the land use and site plan nature of all this, but I do have a couple representatives of the Fresh Start Center with me here this evening, and I think they're better positioned to give you more of a day-to-day look into the proposed use. So if it's okay with the Commission, I'd like to invite the applicant up.
Please.
First, we have Mr. Jonathan Poulter.
Sir, your name again, please?
Rabbi Yochanan Poulter.
Rabbi, welcome.
Thank you. Honorable members of the Zoning Board and esteemed community members, I extend my sincere gratitude for the privilege of addressing you today. I am the Executive Director and co-founder of Fresh Start, and I stand before you today seeking approval for a zoning ordinance that will allow us to operate our retreat here. Let me begin by clarifying what we are not. We are not a mental health facility. We are not an addiction center. We are not a rehab, and we are not an at-risk youth center. So what are we? To answer that question, I'd like to reference a statement from the New York Times best-selling author Michael Singer, known for his work, The Untethered Soul. In it, Michael articulates that spirituality begins where psychology ends. Essentially, while psychology aids individuals in living their best lives, it is ultimately spirituality that guides them to fulfill their true potential as intended by a higher power. Dr. Viktor Frankl, a revered figure in modern psychology, penned his seminal work, Man's Search for Meaning, following his experiences in the Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II. He writes that finding meaning in life, even amidst extreme adversity, empowers individuals not just to endure, but to thrive. Our organization's mission is precisely that, to facilitate healing from past trauma through a profound spiritual and religious lens. We believe that forging a deep connection with the divine is integral to discovering purpose and finding solace, particularly for those who have endured abuse or trauma within a religious framework. This commitment involves cultivating a deep, meaningful spiritual connection with God, discovering purpose and significance in our daily lives through the rich customs and traditions of the Jewish faith, and fostering a sense of belonging within the broader Orthodox Jewish community. The core of our vision is rooted in the belief that spiritual wellness is intrinsically linked to mental and emotional well-being. The religious natures of our retreats holds paramount significance. Our program is intrinsically woven into the fabric of Jewish traditions and values, offering participants an immersive and enriching experience that transcends the ordinary aspects of life. These retreats are not about physical relaxation, but are at their core focused on nurturing the soul, fostering a sense of purpose, and cultivating a deep sense of belonging. It is crucial to underscore the positive impact our program has had on countless lives. Individuals who have participated in our retreats have undergone personal transformations, finding peace, gaining a renewed sense of direction. To date, we have had nearly 250 participants from 9 countries find meaning, purpose, and healing by connecting with God. The testimonials and success stories accumulated over the years stand as a powerful testament to the meaningful impact our organization has had on those who have sought refuge and healing within our community. I'd like to also provide you with a detailed overview of a typical day during one of our retreats. Participants engage in a structured schedule that encompasses a variety of activities aimed at healing and holistic well-being. The day begins with prayer and meditation, allowing individuals to center themselves and connect with their spirituality. Group discussions provide a platform for sharing experiences and building a supportive community. Journaling is encouraged as a means of self-reflection and personal growth. Yoga sessions promote physical health and well-being, while art activities provide an outlet for self-expression. Communal meals serve not only as a nourishment of the body, but also as a time for communal bonding and connection. Recreational activities round out the day, ensuring a balance between spiritual and physical engagement. Importantly, we assure you that our activities have no adverse impact on the surrounding properties. Our location is meticulously maintained, and we take great care to ensure that our endeavors are respectful of the community. We recognize the importance of being good stewards of the land and responsible neighbors. It is imperative to note that our retreats do not involve any medical treatment, as we are not a medical facility. Instead, we offer a unique religious experience that provides hope and healing to those who have endured significant pain and struggles in their lives. In conclusion, we firmly believe that our retreat center aligns seamlessly with the values of the community and contributes significantly to the overall well-being of individuals. We are dedicated to being responsible neighbors, respectful stewards of the land, and contributors to the spiritual communal growth of this vibrant community. I kindly request your support in approving the zoning ordinance, allowing us to perpetuate our mission of providing a haven for spiritual growth, communal connection, and holistic healing. Thank you for your time and consideration. Your support is invaluable in realizing the vision of a community that prioritizes the holistic healing of its members. Thank you.
Rabbi, thank you very much. We would like to
I'd like to also take a moment just to call upon one of our participants, just to share briefly his experience from our
Please.
program. Yehuda?
good evening. Your name, please, sir?
Evening. My name is Yehuda Cohen.
Okay, can we move right close to the microphone there so we can be sure we hear you clearly?
Sure. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Yehuda. I live in Southfield, here locally in Metro Detroit. As a past participant of the Jewish Fresh Start Retreat, Rabbi Poulter asked me to speak and give a real flavor and testament of my experience at the program. When Rabbi Poulter asked if I would be willing to speak before the board, I felt privileged at the opportunity, and such is the reason I stand here tonight. Allow me to give a brief introduction to who I am and a bit about my past. My father is a rabbi. I have 7 older siblings and 1 younger sister, Rena, who has Down syndrome. Growing up with a special needs younger sister has taught me so much about life, amongst them, sensitivity to others. I am married to my wife, Dina, and God has graced us with 5 beautiful children. I have been on an entrepreneurial journey for the last 10 plus years, and am currently in the commercial real estate investment business, along with business interests in the retail and technology sectors. I have had the opportunity to employ many individuals from diverse backgrounds, as well as do business with and support many local businesses here in Metro Detroit. Additionally, caring for those around me and giving back generously to charities in our community is essential to me and an opportunity for which I am so grateful. In each of my main roles, as a husband, a father, an employer, and a giver, I need to consistently monitor and nourish my internal and external well-being to ensure that I am poised and ready to execute maturely and with balance on each of my life's roles and missions. As we all know, life is easier said than done. As one grows up further and life gets more complex, complications start to pile up. Marital stress, children's challenges, work challenges, charitable doubt, family dynamics, religious guilt, etc. This never-ending list, of which we all have our own, only gets longer and begins taking a toll on our life in all aspects. As life goes on and these emotions multiply, their weight becomes heavier and we start to drift emotionally off-center. Most often this happens subconsciously, yet the effects consciously present in all aspects of our life. We all know and can relate in our own way to emotional pain and numbness, and how our childhood and past traumas contribute to our structural emotional balance. It is this emotional structure of well-being which dictates all aspects of our life that propels us to carry forward, to function, to accomplish, and to do so in sadness or in happiness. Thank God, fortunately, I am a highly functioning and successful individual. Yet, as my life complicators became more many and more present, I found myself grappling with conflicting emotions and trouble realigning and rebalancing. This emotional imbalance was blurring my clarity and hindering my decision-making processes. As the executive leader of my organization and life, both professionally and personally, it is critical that my decisions be mature and precise, as my actions profoundly affect many around me. As I happen to be a religious Jew, for me, my journey is foundationally rooted in my religious belief system. However, for each one of us in this room, as fellow humans, our spiritual journey is universally the same. Regardless which label each of us have or don't have, we are all created equally and share the same universal mission. the mission to be the best us we can be, for our sakes, and for the sakes of all those who depend on us. As they say in Fresh Start, the best way to help others is to help yourself. And the best way to help yourself is to help others. My time in Jewish Fresh Start was incredible and life-altering. I had the opportunity to reflect internally and accomplish unparalleled soulful and spiritual introspection. As cell phones are at most an afterthought during this 7-day retreat, I had the opportunity to put my entire life on hold and focus intensely on learning how to balance my human emotions through our unique spiritual lens. It is quite amazing how much we can accomplish when we leave our lives and cell phones completely to the side and live an organic existence on an island for a week. While it was just a 7-day retreat, the time flew by without a dull second. Every minute and every activity, down to the last detail, was meticulously planned to assist in this important spiritual endeavor. Some elements of the program include prayer time and personal spiritual introspection, group panels discussing, analyzing, and educating how to appropriately relate to our emotions within our unique religious belief system and experiences, somatic exercises and education, group activities and meals, expressing ourselves through art, and interpersonal activities consistent with our religious values. The takeaways were abundant, but I will summarize the essential few. I learned and internalized how past traumas consistently always affect my emotional balance and decision-making processes. I began to learn how to decipher and interpret raw emotions in order to channel the mature and sharpened response. I learned how to harness my religious and spiritual journey to empower my daily emotions and actions. I began to learn in countless ways how to live my life in a way that is exponentially more profound for myself and therefore for my family, my employees, and for all those around me. In no amount of words can I properly thank Rabbi Poulter, the staff, and donors of Jewish Fresh Start, or the city of Gross Eel for allowing such a retreat center to be in existence. I surely hope Gross Eel will embrace the opportunity to continue to have such an immensely powerful impact on our world, your world, my world, their worlds, and their little worlds. Our world that is directly impacted by the actions of others. Your world, which allows you the opportunity to help others in such a profound way. My world, for being part of such meaningful change for me. Their world, for all the others who had and will have the opportunity to attend. And their little worlds, for all the children whose lives were and will be profoundly impacted by the positive change of their parents. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, clearly you had a moving experience. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
All right, I'm the boring one, so you get me for a few minutes here. All right, as you just heard, this is, again, the special land use and site plan application for the Jewish Fresh Start Center. This is a sketch of the site plan, which I believe all the commissioners should have a larger view of so you can kind of see it better. Again, this is an existing residential structure that is on the property. We're not proposing to do any sort of changes or modifications to that. So it's just exactly as we found it and exactly as you see it when you walk by. Certainly we can, if you'd like to discuss any particularities of the site plan, we can do that this evening as well. Brief summary of the use, as you just heard from the gentlemen that are here this evening with me. These are 7-day religious retreats. There's 4 to 5 attendees per retreat, 1 to 2 retreats per month. Again, there's no medical care or supervision provided or anything of that nature at the retreats. Basically, these are normal folks getting together and talking about their faith. There's no additional site construction proposed, as we just mentioned. And again, this is a registered 501c3 charitable organization. So again, there is not any profit being made out of these retreats, contrary to anything that might be said otherwise. In terms of land use factors, again, Brian will be going over these as well, I understand, but I just want to touch on them briefly. The property is zoned R1B, as was mentioned. There are some other uses permitted as of right in the R1B district. For example, a state-licensed adult foster care home with up to capacity for 6 is a permitted use, which means it would not need to come before you for this special land use. Same thing with a family daycare in the R1B zone. And again, Fresh Start Center is less intensive than these permitted uses, and we are here before you requesting a special land use this evening. Religious land use, as we're dealing with here this evening, is protected by the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. We addressed that in our correspondence to the township, but basically, you know, if I was to address it from a high-level view, I would say religiously motivated land use activities are protected by federal law. They are required to be treated on equal playing field with secular uses. And it's religious land use that is, again, motivated by sincerely held religious belief. It's not one group or another group's interpretation of what they believe religious land use would be. And again, just speaking to some more land use factors here, the use is compatible with the master plan and the surrounding uses. Again, there's not going to be any change to what you currently see there. It's not going to adjust the character of the area. It will maintain the residential appearance and character that you currently see today. The vast majority of activities take place indoors. There's no loud activities. There's no flashing lights or anything like that. This is something that if you didn't know it was there, chances are you would never notice it. And again, as we've provided evidence on and as the planning staff has evaluated, there's no negative impact on traffic, the environment, or local utilities and services. I do these land use hearings all around the country. I just got back into town from one yesterday, and I have to say that this is the least impactful use that I've been summarizing in quite some time. So it is something that I appreciate as an advocate, because I don't have to stand up here and explain to you, all the crazy things we're going to be doing on the property. This is the opposite of that. And again, no signage or sound amplification is proposed at this property, further maintaining the residential appearance and character. And that is all I have for you with my presentation. So I imagine there's a number of questions that you folks would have. So be happy to answer any of those for you.
Very good. Thank you for the presentation. We'll start over here with Eric. Eric, have you got any specific questions or comments you'd like to address?
To the applicant?
Yes.
No.
Okay. Kyle.
I think I sent the applicant some questions through email, so I'm happy to take some of those offline. But I did want to give the applicant a chance to just describe how you all came to operate, how the township became aware of the situation there, because I know that's part of what folks are here for. Just understanding why Fresh Start Center has operated so far without this special land use permit, and if you could start there, if that's possible.
Absolutely, and that's a fair question.
Mm-hmm.
So when the applicant originally obtained this property, again, these, as I'm sure you've sensed a theme here this evening, these are very low impactful gatherings, and it was not known to the applicant that they needed special land use permission. So as I'm sure you've seen with our correspondence with the township, once we became aware of that, we immediately started dialogue with the township, and that's why you see us here this evening.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this from your question, but does the applicant or any Fresh Start Center affiliate have any experience with other properties like this? Or is this the only one like this?
I believe this is the only facility. Is that correct, Rabbi Poulter?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does the applicant or any affiliates have any other properties on Grosio?
Applicant, so I own the property on Meridian.
Uh-huh.
There's another home that is owned by a friend of ours on Thorntree, which is not used in any way, shape, or form as a retreat center. We use it from time to time. We spend weekends there. Sometimes when there's a program going on, I'll spend a night out there instead of going back to Southfield. but it's for personal use. It's not in any way, shape, or form used as a retreat center.
Okay, so that property won't be a part of this?
That property is not part of this process, and there's no other, I know that there were rumblings on various internet sites about 3 properties, but no, there aren't any.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant like to say anything more about the incident that led the township becoming aware of Fresh Start Center retreats?
Sure, I think that's a great point. Out of 250 participants, there was 1 participant that came that was not an appropriate fit for the program. We actually had a car in the driveway ready to take her home the next day. That's when the incident happened. The police were called, they brought her back, they put her back in the car and sent her on home back to the airport. So I think that incident actually proves that we are not any of the things that may have been said about us. And if you're not a very highly functioning adult living a normal life like Yehuda or myself, then our program is not a fit for you.
Thank you. Will there be anything done to prevent things like that in the future, you think, or it's mostly through screening, or?
Absolutely, there's screening that's done. Like I said, it was a slip-up, and the slip-up was actually fixed immediately by sending the individual home.
And if I could just add to that, if this was let's say a small Christian chapel that was proposed for the site, there's always the chance that you have someone that walks in, doesn't like the sermon, and then decides they're going to go walk about, right? So we're doing everything we can to make sure with appropriate screening and things of that nature that's all taken care of.
Okay, I'm good for now, thank you.
While you're on that topic, would you please describe the screening process in some detail? How do you know this will work for? How do you know that they have no criminal background? How do you screen these people to make sure that they're the right people for the community and for Fresh Start?
So it's a great question. I'm actually one of the people that does the intake process. Generally, people are, the Orthodox community, although we're all over the world, is relatively small and interconnected. Folks are generally referred by friends or family or rabbis. So we'll usually, there'll usually be some connection for somebody showing up to our place. We talk at length with participants, really get to know them. We do it over Zoom. We make sure we see them. We understand their background. We understand what their goals are. We understand what their hopes are. We understand what part of the life they're in. Make sure that they are, again, stable, healthy, functional. But obviously, we all have issues that we'd like to heal and to be the best person we can be. So, like I said, we've to date done about 1,000 intakes, and of those, 250 have attended our program, and 1 was a misfit that was immediately dealt with.
So you've had 1,000 applicants that you've processed, but of those 1,000, only 250 actually qualified to participate
Correct.
in your program?
Correct.
Okay. How confident are you in your process that criminal activity, people with felony convictions or things like that wouldn't slip through?
We're very confident. Again, can I say with 100% certainty? I don't think anything's with 100% certainty, but typically there's lengthy discussions. There's discussions typically with the rabbi that recommends them. People don't just show up to our place out of nowhere. There's typically a string of how they connected with us and how they got to us. Like I said, I think we obviously opened up unknowingly that there was a need for a permit process, but having 250 participants that have come by with 1 incident, I think really describes that our process is pretty rock solid, and it's worked, again, besides for that 1 incident that was dealt with quickly and swiftly. The entire incident you're describing, by the way, lasted about 10 minutes. I just want to put that in perspective.
Okay. I presume you for example, like in a business, if you're interviewing somebody, you get recommendations. Somebody will vouch for that person. Is that part of the process as well?
So it's not formally part of the process. It is informally part of the process where we really have to, like I said, although the community is all over the world, there's typically a connection. We want to know, how did you find out about our program? Who recommended you? How do they know about us? And we sort of connect the dots, and that's definitely a big part of it. If there are questions, we'll reach out to the community rabbi to learn more about the individuals. But oftentimes, it's people that have come that are referring, a husband, a wife, a cousin, a brother, a sister. It's usually close connected, so we understand, the bigger story of how these people came to us and more about their lives.
So from a community safety standpoint, you are confident that the participants in the program are a fit for our community?
I'm absolutely confident. Like I said, historical performance is indicative that it's been that way for 3 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could
Yes,
just
please.
briefly speak to that. I will say, and I believe we've shared some sample screening materials with the township as well. I will say that the type of screening that you get for individuals that come to the Fresh Start Center is far more intense than any other sort of use that you would get at this property. We're talking about, I believe the question was asked, people with felony convictions. Someone with a felony conviction could buy that house and live there permanently. Again, if this was a typical Christian church, there's lots of people, they're encouraged to go to church if they have things in their background. That's not what's going on here. This is a higher level of screening than anything else you're going to get at this site.
Thank you for that. Well, there's been a fear factor in the community about that, and I appreciate you clarifying that point. Jay?
Yeah, if I might, just some questions, largely along the lines of being a little more specific. So, what are the sorts of things, and you referenced some materials, I don't recall if I saw them. If I did, I apologize. What are the sorts of things that would make somebody ineligible in that screening process? What are the sorts of things you would look for that would push you towards it, right?
So I'll tell you, there's 100,000 reasons why somebody wouldn't be a fit. Let me tell you why somebody would be a fit. It's somebody that realizes that connecting with God, religion, and spirituality will have a profound positive impact on their life. Many of us, it's not unique to the Jewish community. Many of us will live on the outside one way and live on the inside another way. And our goal is that the same religious values that we live on the outside, we live on the inside. So that's what we look for in a participant, really someone that is looking to use spirituality and religion as a means to be the best person of themselves, the best version of themselves. Reasons why somebody wouldn't be a fit: mental illness, lack of interest in really doing, really coming and committed to going through the program and doing the processes. Again, like I said, there's a bunch of reasons why somebody wouldn't, and we really focus on making sure that they understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and that's in line with what they're looking to do.
So I'm no mental health expert, so I'm only asking questions. But are there traumas that are beyond this? In other words, you would say.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Any mental health diagnoses won't come to our program. There's a lot of traumas that are beyond what we can do.
You mentioned traumas in earlier parts of the life.
So, I don't think this is unique to Judaism, but a lot of being brought up in a religious lifestyle, very often the abuse and the trauma that happens to us is done under the guise of religious observances. So a child could be beaten because he didn't pray 3 times a day. And there's the physical abuse, but there's also that whole religious abuse where God ultimately becomes the enemy. So our goal is to help heal that relationship. The traumas might be physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, rough divorces in your childhood. But oftentimes, again, within the Orthodox Jewish community, it's very often couched under religious observances. And that's the part that makes our trauma unique and also our healing unique.
So one of the, John, fear factor. And I think one of those factors is when we talk about recovery from trauma, I think a lot of people, and again, I'm no mental health expert, but I think a lot of people associate trauma and recovery from trauma with self, harm, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex abuse.
Any of those behaviors would disqualify a participant from coming to our program. I myself am a trauma survivor. I was born with what's called a cleft lip and palate. When I was born, they told my parents I wouldn't be able to eat or speak. That was in 1977. 21 surgeries later and 12 years of speech therapy, I stand before you today. That's trauma.
And then are all of the participants voluntary?
Everybody's voluntary.
There's no, if somebody called and said that, I want my daughter to go to this or something like that.
Actually, that is a disqualifier. If somebody calls and they're being pushed by a spouse or a parent to attend, they're not a fit for our program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Mr. Rathel.
None at this time, John.
Okay. Angela.
I have a few. Just to start, so you said you've seen about 250 people. Has that all been in Groseal in this one particular facility?
Yes,
And for how long?
about 3 years.
About 3 years. And why Groseal? What you're in Southfield? You're based in Southfield. Why in Groseal?
I happen to be a water lover, and I have a boat, and my boat is currently at Gibraltar Boatyard. And I've been out here a lot, and I thought it was a beautiful place to get a vacation home, which is really how this started initially. So me and a partner of mine bought it. So the home is not owned by the organization. The home is owned by 2 individuals, and we pay taxes on it. And once we got it, this thing opened up, and it sort of just morphed and turned into what it is. But that's how we ended up out here.
That's helpful. Now, you say that it's not, I guess I'm confused on the blurred line between it being, I understand therapy in terms of religious-based therapy, and I understand therapy for mental health, and I think that there's not really, you're drawing a very clear line, and I don't really see the clear line, and I'm curious how those two are not blurred. You're saying you're not a mental health service, but I would consider that very much a mental health service, good, bad, or otherwise. I think, I guess I'm...
Well, I suppose we actually went through a process with the state of Michigan. Maybe you want to chat about that for a moment?
Okay.
Yeah, the state of Michigan has done a study on the center, and we provided this to the township, I believe, as well. Their outcome was that there is no treatment or supervision of any kind being provided at the center. I suppose I can understand the question of, okay, well, this isn't religious use that I'm necessarily familiar with. And I think that's maybe where some of this kind of gets lost in translation a little bit. To the participants and to the community that runs this, this is something that is central to their faith, and this is not something that they want to intermix with any sort of medical care or treatment or anything like that. So they're purposefully moving not even close to that direction in how they administer these retreats.
No, that's helpful. And retreats, to me, are they staying at the property? I read in my packet
Yeah,
that they're not.
so they
but-
do have the ability to. Many do. I would say majority do. But very often they don't, either if they live locally or they just want to have their space and stay in a hotel. They can do that as well. I would say out of 5 participants, 3 usually are staying, 3 to 4, but it all depends on the week.
And I think, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the folks that are here, but I would think, we're not in Groseal a very transient community. There's an Airbnb or a few Airbnbs that have created a lot of similar kind of conversation because when folks come in, when we think of a religious organization, we think folks coming, sticking around for a while, and enjoying and partaking in that community aspect of the religion. So I would venture to say that's probably a piece of that, is not knowing who's in that house on a weekly basis. Just, just food for thought, I guess. And then my last question, so, actually, I lied, I have two more questions. Compliance-wise, do you have a board? You're a 501c3. Who comprises the board? Because I would imagine then you report into the board, or? Okay.
We do have a board. One of our board members is here, Rabbi Levi Shem Tov, who's the executive director of a international organization called Friendship Circle, dealing with children and adults with special needs. Our board consists of rabbis and an attorney and a few other folks, but it is a 5-person independent board that we report to.
Okay.
We
that's
are
helpful.
registered as I believe, an ecclesiastical nonprofit corporation.
Okay, last question. So, and maybe just for the benefit of everyone, how is this something that if I'm coming to your retreat and I'm an Orthodox, of Orthodox Jewish faith, how is it different than what someone could get from, say, synagogue or, a more typical relationship with the church?
So I suppose that with the right rabbi and the right amount of time, someone is able to possibly gain from this. This is a little different because it's working with people that understand how abuse and trauma and neglect early on in your years impacts your day-to-day life today, and that's a key piece of understanding it. And essentially, it's a program where you just shut down the rest of the world, and for 7 days you're really focused on finding your soul and rebuilding your connection and realizing that while bad stuff may have happened to you, God is still loving and kind, and really reframing that whole relationship with yourself, with your God, with your religion, with your community. And typically a rabbi will not have that much time in the day to really give a person. And even if they do, getting away from your everyday life and just coming to an island and shutting it all down and really focusing on healing yourself and understanding your past hurts and understanding what you need to do and what you can do to reconnect is what we offer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Another question or two. Specifically from the website, there was reference to a number of mental health experts that you call in. Who are these people, and what function do they play in your overall treatment program?
Again, most of the names on our website are not actually called in, nor are they on site. They provide a framework and an understanding. We offer additional programming to the world outside of our retreats. Part of our goal is to educate the Orthodox world on the concept of trauma and its impact on everyday life, and we use a variety of professionals in the field to do that. And there's also, education and training to our workshop facilitators to better understand how trauma creates disconnection and a numbness in an individual. But really, pretty much at every session, there's usually one facilitator, which is a Orthodox trained therapist as well. They're both, but they're all Orthodox, they're all religious, and they all have a heavy degree of rabbinical training, and they blend both of those worlds. The rest of the people are not on site, nor do they work with the clients or participants of our program.
Thank you. Well, I noticed, the website had quite a list of people that you call in. Does somebody from that group attend every retreat, or is it, when do these people come in?
So they don't actually come in. They do two things. They provide supervision and training to both our workshop facilitators as well as other programs that we run, nothing to do with Gross Seal. We run training for rabbis. We run training for schools we're building out, for teachers to understand the impact of their behavior. So we offer a broad array of products, and those professionals will work in a variety of different capacities for us, typically in a consulting capacity. None of them are local. Almost none of them are local, I would say. And that's how we work with them in those capacities as well.
They are a resource to your organization.
Correct.
To train the people who are helping
Correct.
the attendees.
That's part of their role. They do other things too, but yes, meaning outside of the retreat, we offer other services to the Orthodox world. And they help us in that area of training rabbis and schools, et cetera.
Okay. I'd like to come back to the short comment you made about the federal law. I would like you to expand on that, please. You had a description which I thought is worth reviewing in your application, in your summary. I think it's important for people to understand what are the rules relative to federal protection for religious functions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of dangerous. You're giving an attorney no time limit to talk about a law, so I will try to be respectful of everyone's time. So the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, it was passed in the year 2000 by a unanimous Congress, if you can believe that. And basically what it says is religious land uses historically have been subject to unequal treatment when it comes to land use and zoning processes like this one. Whether that's intentional, sometimes that's intentional in some communities, sometimes it's unintentional and is just more so spurred on by confusion or fear, and sometimes it's just there's pretextual reasons that are used to deny religious land uses. So what the Religious Land Use Act really does when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it is, number one, it says that no municipal board or no person, not me or not another attorney, can tell a religious group how it needs to believe and how it needs to exercise its religious land use. The next thing it says is that religious land uses needs to be treated equally as opposed to secular land uses. So, for example, and this is not what we're dealing with here tonight, so that's why I'm using this example. If Assembly Hall was allowed in a zoning district, but worship center was not, that would be a violation because they're basically the same thing. The only differentiator is the religious aspect of it. So this law says you can't be treated less than equal just because you're religious in terms of your land use. There's a couple different prongs to it in terms of how it can be violated and the remedies. I don't know if you want me to get into that as well.
No.
Okay, I didn't think so. But I'd be happy to answer anything else for you.
Okay. That pretty well, I think, completes my questions. I think we're ready now to hear from Brian. He's going to explain to us about the applicable ordinances and how they are addressed.
Thank you.
Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Give me one moment to swap these out. And here we go. All right, some of this will be redundant. I will try my best to avoid the redundancies where I think it's appropriate. I will apologize for the residents and to the commission. This is one of my wordier presentations, and you know I can be wordy in person, but this presentation is a bit wordy, so I will do my very best to not just hit this verbatim. I'm going to kind of hit the high points. So commission has my full review letter. Staff has my full review letter. Petitioner has my full review letter. That's where all of the detail behind most of what I'll say tonight comes. So starting point, again, my overview is going to be redundant, but just have to deal with it. So 23285 Meridian is our subject site. If you can see on the screen, this is the structure here. This is the existing single-family residence. It is at the corner of Meridian and Ferry. As has been noted, the site and the surrounding area really are zoned R1B single-family residential. The proposal before you, as discussed, is a religious retreat center Chairman noted at the outset, at the introduction of the case, under ordinance definition of a church, any structure wherein persons regularly assemble for religious activity, that is the closest fit under the ordinance. That is why we are processing it as such. And specifically, churches in R1B are listed as special land uses. So that's inherently the process that we will be going through. It starts with the special use, and then all special land uses by ordinance must also incorporate a site plan review. So those are the two big items that are in front of the commission. As noted too, there is a bit of a process involved in this. So we are here tonight for the Planning Commission review of the special land use and the site plan. We will conduct the public hearing, and by ordinance, the commission's in position to potentially put forth a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeal on the variances that I believe are needed for this particular request. So that's where we are this evening. Whether the commission comes to the conclusion of making that recommendation tonight or not is entirely up to the commission. So that is something you are not obligated to do. But again, because of my opinion that they do need variances, the process that's laid out before you is that you cannot act on the special use or site plan until the ZBA has dealt with the variances. So if you take an action tonight, it would be a recommendation to ZBA, or it could be to table or postpone for additional information as may be needed. So hopefully that all makes sense. The second step in the process would be for the petitioner to apply for and present to the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are two, I'll get to these in more detail, but there are two variances that I see are needed. It's two variances from the same standard. ZBA also is required by law to conduct a public hearing. That would also be noticed. So I want the residents to be aware of that in the same manner as the special land use was noticed in the paper and direct mail to owners and occupants within 300 feet. The ZBA would do the same notification for that ZBA meeting. I did put some dates on the screen. The soonest that the ZBA could happen would be the April meeting, the fourth Tuesday in April, the 23rd. There is no guarantee that we hit that date, but I wanted to try to put some time frames to this. If the project received the actions needed, this is kind of the quickest path forward, is what I'm presenting tonight. There is no guarantee that we hit those meeting dates, though. The third step following ZBA action on the variance would be to come back to Planning Commission. Because of the nature of special land uses, Planning Commission is a recommending body, so you would put forth a recommendation to the Township Board. However, again, as Chairman noted, you do have the final review authority over the site plan. So there's two elements. One will be a recommendation, one will be your action. The ordinance does give you the ability to act simultaneously on the site plan or to postpone action on that until after the board has dealt with the special land use. So there would be an option there where potentially, and again, I use the potential date of May 6th, which would be the essentially the soonest Planning Commission meeting we could get back to for this. You would be able to forward a recommendation on the special use. You may or may not at that time act on the site plan as well. And then the last step in the process, provided commission acts on the site plan, would be the Township Board. So they would be making the final decision on the special land use. And again, I put the dates in here. If we hit all of the targets and got all of the actions needed, potentially they could be in front of the board in May. So I don't know that that's going to happen, but again, I wanted to put some context to the dates and the process. I have the same site plan that was submitted and petitioner presented to you earlier. Not really a lot to say about this at this time. I'm happy to go back to this if there are questions. This is Ferry, top of screen, Meridian, left side. This is the existing residence. This is the existing driveway. Garage is on the north side off of Ferry. There is a boardwalk / dock in the waterfront area of the property. And then the residence does have a sort of a waterfront yard, deck and patio situation. So there is in here, that's kind of what you're seeing here is the shaded area. The hatch is essentially an at-ground patio. And then this is a little bit of a raised deck on that patio, which you'll see in more detail. So we do have some photos of the site again. So the top row of pictures, the first one on upper left, if you can follow along on your screen, is the meridian front yard view of the residence. The middle top row is the waterfront yard view of the residence. I'm right here. As I mentioned, you can see on the site plan, so there is a sort of a paver patio with a bit of a raised deck off the back. And I didn't note some of the vegetation that's bubbled out on that site plan, but there is quite a bit of dense, mature vegetation, both on site and on the neighboring property. Continuing across the top, so this is the view from Ferry. So this is the garage and driveway side of the home. You can see, and I'll have a comment on this a little bit later, you can see that the residence does have a 3-car attached garage and does have a relatively large driveway. Bottom of the screen, bottom left, so this is a view from the canal back towards the residence, and then this is the boardwalk / dock that I referenced and showed on the plan. And then bottom right, this is essentially the large area of tree buffers off of the driveway side and Ferry. So Ferry is out here. This is essentially along the east side of the driveway, and this large canopy of trees does extend across the Ferry Road frontage as well. And it does not show great, but you can kind of see this bubbled out area. So that's what we were just looking at. And then on the other side, these are the vegetation sort of between the homes, though I think most of that is on the neighboring property. All right, so there are 3 specific sections to my review letter. The first is related to the special land use standards, of which there are 6. So within section 22.3, we have 6 criteria that we have to evaluate in order to come to a decision on the special land use. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to read all of this, but I do have excerpts, pardon me, from the master plan. The site is planned as single-family residential, and specifically, you have a sort of a more distinct neighborhood description beyond just single-family residential, and this property is within the category of what's referred to as canal residential, which makes sense. Hopefully, it's on the canal. So, as I mentioned, I do have a few other items in here. I have some excerpts. I have some goals referenced. I have some objectives referenced. Those are, again, all in detail in my letter. And if need be, Mr. Chair, I can go back to these, but again, I don't want to waste everyone's time just reading these. So the closing point of the compatibility with the master plan criterion, in my opinion, is that in order for you to make a favorable finding, I do think that the proposed use must maintain and preserve the neighborhood character, and an additional comment of protecting the privacy of the existing residences in the area. So those are items that come directly from your master plan. The second standard is the compatibility with adjacent uses. As I sort of showed in the aerial, and I think you're aware, essentially this is predominantly single-family use in this area. West Shore is off a little bit to the northwest, sort of opposite intersection side, but I think they even have some vacant residential lots that line the road frontage, and the golf course sits back a bit. So there are a number of considerations here for you again. Things like screening, noise generation, light intrusion, I think are really important. We have to consider those in, again, trying to maintain that residential character and protecting the surrounding and neighboring residents. So I do have some suggested conditions that relate to that. Again, these are in my letter, but I do want to hit some of these for the sake of discussion. So one thing related to noise, and especially because they do have a large waterfront yard, I would like to see limitation or prohibition on outdoor noise amplification. That's just something with, want to make sure, again, they're blending in with the neighborhood as much as possible, and I want to protect against that if there were to be some type of a service that's conducted outside on the patio or even on one of the, down by the dock area. We want to make sure that the noise is in keeping with that of a typical single-family residence. As it relates to light, I would also like to see some type of limitation on the exterior lighting, particularly for the waterfront yard. That's my biggest concern. I believe there are some sort of typical residential fixtures. So we have some porch lights, we have some garage lights. Those don't concern me as much, though if there's a neighborhood concern about it, certainly we'll let the residents speak to that. My concern is more sort of the private area, the potential impacts to the neighboring residents to the south in terms of any light intrusion that might come from that waterfront yard area. And really, part of the reason for my concern there, and my suggested condition is really that it could be put on timers. There could be a sort of end-all shut-off time, like maybe they're just shut off at 10 p.m. or whatever it is. But the reason that I'm concerned a little bit about lighting, and I want to make sure that it's addressed in some manner, whether by the applicant, whether by condition of the township, is because this property will not always be occupied. And so one of the things that I could envision happening, I'm not saying the petitioner would do it, but I could certainly envision happening, is the retreat ends on Sunday, last person there didn't turn the lights off, and the next retreat isn't for 2 weeks. And then that light is on for 2 weeks straight, solid through the night, into the morning. So those are the kinds of things where, again, to protect that residential character, I would like to see some type of a condition. And then I've also mentioned the use of sound equipment, which I think should be prohibited. I do believe the petitioner in their opening presentation noted that they would not be using any sound amplification. So closing point under compatibility with adjacent uses. Again, in order for the commission to make a favorable finding, I do think that some conditions are necessary or at least appropriate to help protect the residential uses from potential adverse impact. The third standard is impact on the street system. So in this particular case, given the limitations that are imposed on the number of attendees and staff people at any given time, and the fact that this property has its access off of a collector roadway, I don't believe that there will be any adverse impacts on the street system. Impact on the environment. So the site is already developed, as we've noted. So the use really, based on the description provided, isn't expected to do anything more to the natural environment beyond the development that's occurred. There is a waterfront structure, as I mentioned earlier. We did go back and look at the file. The residence and the waterfront structure were built in kind of the early to mid 90s era. So there hasn't been a lot of other activity to that waterfront yard. So don't foresee any real issues on the natural environment. I did take sort of a sidestep under this idea because I do consider the waterway to be an important environmental feature as well. So I did ask the petitioner as part of the review process about their use of the waterway, whether they would have boats, whatever might occur there as part of their retreats. The response was that they said they would potentially use some non-motorized watercraft, so kayaks were the specific example, but they did note that they do not propose the use of motorized boats or watercraft at this site as part of the retreat. So I thought that was an important point to get out there as well. The fifth standard, and I just realized I'm taking more time than I expected, but
That's all right, you're being
bear
thorough.
with me.
No problem.
So the fifth standard is compliance with the intent of the zoning district. So as noted, the site is zoned R1B. R1B is one of several single-family residential zone districts. Section 3.1 of the Township Zoning Ordinance identifies several bullet points of basically the idea of what the intent is for those districts. Most of it ties back to a phrase that I've already said, and I'm going to say a few more times, is essentially upholding the residential character of the area. So again, the closing point on this, I won't read all of them. I feel a few of these are certainly applicable here, but in order for the commission ultimately to make a favorable finding, I do think, again, similar to what I've already pointed out, there are some conditions that will be needed or some limitations that ultimately are necessary to help uphold the residential character of the property and of the surrounding area. And then the sixth point under special land use standards is the impact potentially on public facilities and services. Again, the site's already developed. There's a limit on the number of people that will be there. I really don't foresee adverse impacts on public services and facilities. The second part of the review is the use requirements. So section 3.3C paragraph 2B has 4 specific requirements that are applicable to churches. So again, remember that by definition, this is deemed a church, therefore we're processing it as a church, special land use in R1B, which means we also have to apply the use requirements for a church. So while I understand it is not a traditional church, the nature of other churches on the island, be it St. James or Church of the Way, etc., but that is how it fits under the zoning ordinance, so we are applying these standards. So the first issue and the foremost issue under these use requirements is the setback requirement. So under this section of the ordinance, a church building has to provide at least a 40-foot setback on all sides. The existing residence has an approximately 38-foot setback at its near point to the meridian front lot line, and only a 2-foot setback from the southerly side lot line. So I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but you can see here, it is quite close to the south side lot line, and it's a little bit closer than it should be to the meridian front lot line. Now, as a single-family residence, this would just be considered non-conforming. It's in place, it was approved, it was permitted, so it would just be deemed non-conforming. That would not preclude use or continued use of the property as a single-family home. However, the proposal to change the nature of the use brings these standards into play. So that being said, that's why I've offered the opinion that I believe variances are necessary for those 2 lot lines as part of this review process. The second standard is that the parking lot has to be screened. So in this case, the parking lot is essentially the driveway and garage area on the north side of the home. I showed you earlier in the pictures and on aerial, there is a pretty dense evergreen screen that runs the east side of the I'm going to call it a parking lot now, of the driveway, and continues along. So here we are. If you can follow my cursor again, right here, follows then down the Ferry Road frontage. By ordinance, because there really isn't any landscape screening on the west side of the driveway, commission could require additional plantings in that area to help protect views and to meet that standard. Access, there's also an access requirement. So a church has to have access to or from either an arterial roadway or a collector roadway. Those are, I don't want to get too deep into this, but those are, there's a functional classification for roadways. There's arterials, which in this case would be your main roads. Meridian is an arterial road. Collectors are roads that connect the local or residential streets to the arterial roads. So in this case, Ferry Road is a collector road. So the site does have frontage on Meridian and has access to and from Ferry, as I've noted. So this standard is met. So they do have direct access to and from a collector road. And then the last of the 4 points is that there's a provision related to accessory uses. And again, put yourself in the mindset of more of a traditional church is how this would typically be applied. It talks about daycares and school uses that have to also obtain separate approvals. They can't just be, they're not just permitted by granting of a church. In this case, the nature of this request does not entail a daycare or a school. So it's not really anything that is applicable. My closing points. So this is tied back to the site plan. So as I mentioned, when we have special land use, we also have to have site plan. Because there really aren't any changes proposed, because this was historically a single-family property, there's not a lot that we have to deal with in terms of a site plan, but I do have a few things that A, I want to point out, and B, I have some other suggestions that would be potentially tied back to conditions that I think would be appropriate. So dimensional standards, I've already told you my opinion is that variances are needed. They don't meet the setbacks for the use requirements. There are no exterior changes proposed to the building. I did point out in my letter, and again, I'm just mentioning this for the petitioner's consideration, if there is interior work, remodeling, et cetera, that is needed to accommodate the use, that may very well require building permits. So it's not anything for the commission to worry about, but I do want to make sure that if they are considering some remodeling on the inside, that they consult with the building official and make sure they get any permits that are required. Pedestrian circulation, the bike path runs across the front of the property. They're not required to build any new sidewalks. Vehicular circulation, we've already talked about access to and from Ferry, which is a collector road. The size of the driveway, its design, the three-car garage aspect, they can maneuver cars in and out of there without causing disruptions to Ferry Road. That leads us to parking. So the conventional ordinance standard for parking is related to the number of seats in the main hall of worship. We don't have a main hall of worship here. So what I tried to do under this section is just use common sense. There's potentially only up to a maximum of 8 cars at any given time. 8 people, potentially 8 cars. My understanding, I don't want to speak for the petitioner, my understanding is that not everybody drives separately. Many of the attendees use a rideshare service, so they won't actually have a car there, but that's the max possible at any given time. That driveway and garage configuration can accommodate up to 8 vehicles, so I don't see an issue there. I do have another suggestion as it relates to this, though. Again, trying to uphold residential character. What I would like to suggest, again, the commission consider as a condition, the applicant could, make it their own limitation. They could volunteer it. But I would like to see that the garage spaces be occupied before vehicles start lining up in the driveway. And I think that just, again, the idea of upwards of 8 vehicles sitting in a driveway is maybe a little bit above and beyond the norm of what we would see in a residential neighborhood. So I would like to see use of those garage spaces so that the first 3 vehicles on site would use the garage. If there's a 4th or a 5th, they're in the driveway, I get it, but I want to sort of prevent the idea that everybody is just out in the driveway, has the look of maybe not a single family residence at that point. Another important one, waste receptacles. So in this case, the petitioner is using just the conventional residential pickup service. They put the bins out on Ferry Road. Waste hauler comes the next day, picks them up, bins are put back away. I've had some discussion with township staff, and I understand that there have been some complaints about this property with respect to their trash and recycle bins. So I do think this is appropriate as well. So point 1 is that there is a spot on the site plan that is identified sort of between the garage and the dense hedgerow. That's identified as sort of the storage location for the trash and recycle bins. I would like to see those trash and recycle bins stored inside the garage. My understanding, and again, this is only what I've heard through staff, my understanding is there are upwards of maybe 7 or 8 bins, and I don't think it's appropriate for those to just be left outside. Again, to uphold residential character, I think those should be put inside the garage. To that end, the complaints that the township received were not only the number of receptacles, but also tied to when those receptacles were put out and when they were put away after pickup. So I think it would also be appropriate to establish, I've used the word reasonable because I didn't have an exact time in mind, but I do think we should establish a time frame when they can be put out and then when they have to be put away after pickup so that they're not left out for a number of days. And I've said this before, but my concern to this end is really tied to the fact that the property will not always be occupied. So much like the lighting I referenced earlier, if it's a Monday morning pickup and there's no retreat that week, bins are put out on Sunday night, they're picked up Monday, nobody's back there again for a week, maybe 2 weeks. I don't want the bins left out for a week, they really shouldn't be left out for, more than the next day. So want to make sure that we have some conditions applicable to that so that the petitioners can ensure that those get put away in a timely manner and don't get left out. Again, my goal here is to protect and uphold that residential character. Lighting, we've already talked about. Landscape screening, I've pretty much talked about, though my suggestion to that end, beyond what I referenced in the other two sections, was that we do have an abutting residence to the south. There is quite a bit of existing mature vegetation. Most of it is on the neighbor's property, not on the subject site. But my point is, if there are any gaps in plantings in this area, especially on the side lot line between the buildings, then I do think it would be appropriate for the commission to require some additional plantings. So I did not have time to go out and walk the site, so I don't know if it's a fully, it's a full screen hedge and nothing is visible through it. But if there are gaps, I think that's another place where, again, sort of upholding the residential character, protecting that neighbor from potential impacts, not to mention the requirements of the ordinance, which do require a buffer zone. Commission would be well within its right to require some additional or supplemental landscaping in that area. My closing point, signage. So this is another one. Under the ordinance, they would, if approved, be allowed some form of signage. I did have discussion with the petitioner again during the review process. They indicated they are not going to have any signage. And I bring that up only because, again, I think it's important as it relates to residential character. I think having a sign out at the corner really starts to detract from that. The idea here is to make sure it blends in with the neighborhood. So their proposal to not have any signage, I think, does help that aspect as well. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Brian, thank you very much. Great job as usual. Let's see if there are comments or questions for you from the commissioners. We'll start with Angela.
I have a quick question. What happens, let's say this is granted, and in a few years the home sells. What happens to the way that home is represented in the sale and how it continues? So is it residential again, or what does that look like?
Well, so it could be any number of things. So special land use is run with the land. So if the property were sold to another entity or group that wanted to run religious retreats in the same fashion that it was approved, they could continue to do so. If somebody wanted to purchase it and convert it back to a single-family home, they could also do that.
Would if someone wanted to convert it back to a family home, would they have to come before the planning commission or ZBA
Nope.
at that point? They would be able to do.
Nope.
they would take that
It's
action.
single-family zoning, single-family residence is a by right use.
Okay. And maybe this isn't a question for you, I'm not quite sure, but the petitioner mentioned that the property is in his name currently, not in the 501c3. Would that have to change? Would the property owner have to be named as the 501c3, or would he continue on as the property owner?
As long as there's a connection between the ownership and the special land use application, I don't think they necessarily have to change the title or anything like that.
And does that change anything in terms of property taxes and how those are
I
collected?
have no idea. You'd have to talk to the assessor. We can ask the assessor, I should say, but I can't speak to anything about taxes.
Thanks.
Thank you, Angela. John?
Nothing at this time, John, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Frucci?
Yeah, I just, I apologize, I didn't have my microphone on earlier. My wife sent me a text, said, turn your microphone on. So I apologize if anybody didn't
Is she
hear me
watching
earlier.
on TV?
She is,
Okay.
yes, yes.
You want to repeat everything?
Yeah, I'll start over, right? So, no, rookie mistake after 20
years.
20 years up here. But the determination that it's a church, right? I mean, my understanding is that, I'll tell you my understanding, and then you tell me how it really works. My understanding is that if something doesn't fit exactly, we look for the thing that is most like it, right? And there may be 2 or 3 things that are like it, but we have to pick the one that's most like it and then apply as if that's what it is. Is that
To a
correct?
degree, yeah. There would have been a couple of options here. Again, the way this has been presented, I'm of the opinion that it does fit the definition. The definition is pretty broad. I think it does fit the definition. The other avenue that could have been undertaken is a similar use determination, which is a process that's also outlined in the zoning ordinance. But the way those criteria lay out, the way the ordinance reads, you probably would have just ended up circling back to, well, it's a church, because that's the most similar based on the definition. So, the other options, which really weren't available because of the way this whole thing has gone down, would be for the township to consider amending the ordinance and to specifically write in a religious retreat center as its own land use, that sort of thing. But under the ordinance that we have to work with, based on the definition, we've determined that, yeah, it is a church. That is the closest fit.
Okay, so even in your reference, you mentioned care facilities that are single-family residential and care. Is this, I mean, some people have said this is more of a care facility than it is a church. Is that, how
So
do they
this,
differ?
I didn't participate in the initial dialogue, but I have spoken to staff and I've got enough information as part of my file. That's kind of where this whole thing started. When the township was informed that there was something else going on here, there was outreach, there was some dialogue, and the state was contacted to see if this was a licensed care facility. The state did come in, do some level of an investigation, and they deemed that it was not a care facility and it was not under their control. So they did not have any, they didn't have any, can't think of the right word, Ross could probably do it, but, it was essentially a local matter. It was not, by their definition, something that required state license and approval or inspection by the state, as a care facility would.
All right, that was my only remaining question.
Thank you, Jay. Eric?
Yeah, a lot of questions. Still trying to wrap my head whether this is a church or a retreat center. And I understand when you wrap the religious thing on it, you can kind of call anything a church. So I'm still trying to figure that out. If it is a church, then, it's got a whole lot of requirements from the ZBA that it does not meet. Could it meet those? Some yes, some will require variance. If we're trying to fit this thing as a church into a residential area, there's a whole lot, outside of the ZBA, there's things like the 7 trash bins, right? I've driven by and I see them all out there. At one time they were yellow and red and massive, and there was a lot of them. So if it's a church, you're probably going to have a dumpster with a normal trash service versus 7 giant bins. So there's just a lot of things we're trying to shoehorn into a residential area that I'm struggling with wrapping my heads around. The other question, right, is this a special land use at all, or is this just someone operating a business out of their home? Right, and I don't know if there's ordinances around that.
Well, there are several things that could be deemed, you may have to get more specific, several things that could be deemed a business that are residential land uses. There's home occupations, there's daycare, there's foster care, there's schools, there's boat clubs, etc. So, there's a number of items.
Adult retreat centers for the,
Churches.
week long. So that's why you go back to special land use versus,
Structures wherein people regularly assemble for religious activity.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kyle?
Nothing further at this time.
Okay, I have no further questions or comments at this point. You did your usual thorough job. We've been at this now for an hour and a half. We're going to take a 5-minute break before we start the public hearing. 5-minute recess. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to reconvene now, and we're going to move to the part of the meeting, which is the public hearing. There are some rules that I want to specify here as to how this is going to be conducted. First, when you come up to the microphone, give your name and your address slowly so that we can identify you and identify your comments, for the public record. Please also make sure to stand next to that microphone. It doesn't track particularly well if you're more than 3 or 4 inches away from it. So, in order for people to be able to hear you, please get close to it and speak up. We do have a television audience as well, and so remember that if you would. Speakers are going to be limited to 3 minutes. Mr. Frucci over here is going to be our timekeeper, and he will give you the high sign when you're at 3 minutes, and then please wrap up promptly when you see his signal. All comments must be directed to the chair. There will be no direct dialogue with the applicant, with the planner, or other commissioners to or from the audience. Everything comes to me. All comments must be issue-focused. I'm sorry to have to say this because it shouldn't be necessary, but in these times, you never know. Racial or religious slurs will not be tolerated. The way this will work is that as speakers are pointing out their concerns and their questions and their main points, these will be captured. And after we complete the public hearing, we're going to run through each one of those things and address them appropriately. So when we start, I will go around the room for the first-time speakers. If you wish to speak a second time, you'll have to wait until everybody that's gone once is completed. And then if you speak a second time, we would expect it to be something different than what you have previously or heard, or basically new information. So finally, you may hear opinions on this application that you may agree with. You may hear opinions that you disagree with. In either case, please show respect for the speakers, the audience, and the Planning Commission by staying quiet in the audience. Everyone has a right to be heard. This includes both the audience in the room and in the television audience. So please be respectful. On that note, I will formally open the public hearing. Those wishing to speak, please raise your hand, and I will call on you and we'll get started. Who would like to speak? Sorry? Back row? Yes, sir. Please come on up.
Hi, my name is Alex White. I live at 24509 Haley Crescent Drive.
Yes, sir.
Here, obviously, to talk about the issue at hand. While I understand the language, pretty philosophical, provided by the petitioner and the proprietor, I think a cursory review of the website makes it pretty clear that this is of medical nature, that there are medical things going on, that this is a managed care type thing where people are providing assistance for mental issues. I was confused when the gentleman was speaking. It seemed pretty wish-washy. It is about mental illness, but it's not about mental illness, but it is, but it isn't, but that's a disqualifier if you have mental illness. That seemed really unclear to me. Based upon what I've seen and based upon my research on the website, this is a treatment facility with a religious affiliation. For paying customers, I understand they pay in excess of $7,500 a month, who have suffered emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. The transient nature of their clientele and lack of clear protocols for maintaining security poses a risk for the families that live adjacent to this facility and the community as a whole. We have reportedly already experienced an incident in which a patient or a customer, or however you would deem them, has exited this facility under duress and accosted a community member in the presence of young children. A facility like this does not have place in a residential neighborhood. I know the gentleman earlier had spoken about the character of the neighborhood. I think that's very important to consider when you're thinking about this. and calling it a church is patently false from a common sense perspective. While I support the mission and believe that mental health is a very real crisis, the covert and disingenuous way in which they have set up these facilities in our community does not engender the slightest bit of trust and leads me to believe that they do not care about the welfare of our community and are instead driven by outside motivations, possibly profit. As I understand, they're paying a lot of money. When you multiply $7,500 times 4 people, times a week, times 50 weeks in a year, you're talking about upwards of $1 million. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Who else would like to speak, please? Raise your hand. Yes, sir. Come on up.
I'm Bill Heil. I live at 29228 East River Road, Grosse Seal.
Mr. Heil?
This project, this situation here could be looked at from a number of views, from a number of different perspectives. And I'm basically concerned that we approach it with care because of that. Because we're creating an interpretation, we're creating a precedent for perhaps something in the future. This organization seems in essence successful. They might grow. What do we do then when we're going to have them grow throughout the neighborhood? I'm not sure that's what we want. We have to consider a variety of viewpoints. I'm just bringing this up as an example of things that might be taken into consideration as we progress through the thought process here. This control of troubled people is a point that I think is valid. When people are emotional, we don't know what they might do. And I don't mean to be spreading fear here, but what we would do under a normal circumstance if our waters are boiling a little more than they should be is a different thing. And making sure that the preview, when we look at these people and sort them out, that they've used great care before they've enrolled somebody in this neighborhood, I think is a worthy requirement. And if that was further explained, I think that we would benefit from that. The location itself, I mean, if they grow and do things, if it were sitting on Macomb where there weren't as many people, or some more remote location, I think there would be less concern. It would be more costly for them, perhaps. But making sure that this thing fits and that it's administrated properly is the goal here, and I'm just reaffirming that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speakers, please. Raise your hand.
Back.
Back row.
My name is Mary Howe. I live at 20678 East River Road.
How?
I've got a lot of concerns. I think it's great that you're trying to uplift people, that are down and need that. There are so many that in this world that need help, and I have passion for the same thing. My concern, I guess I need just a clarification on a couple things. I know that there's, in religion, we can do a lot of healing and we can find that inner peace through God. But the other thing, when we are in pain, when we are traumatized, when we have all these things on, those are all emotional factors. And a lot of times when you talked about the facilitators on site, the Fresh Start initiative shows 7 or 8 psychiatrists that are on staff. Are those the facilitators that are directing the people?
Okay, we will answer the questions when we get to the end. Continue your questions.
My concern is the people that are helping these people in the group sessions are the people that are the facilitators, or that the facilitators are guided by, are those the psychiatrists that are shown on the Fresh the Fresh Start initiative? Are those the people that are giving them the help so that they can help the patients or the people that are at these sessions? And the other thing is, when the house was it bought with the idea that we here in Groseal knew that it was going to be used as a church, or was the forethought not, I guess, was there any pretense? If the thought was that this was going to be used for a religious purpose, was that known at the time of the sale, or was that offered later? I mean, was there any other, I wonder about the forethought with buying this home, and are their best intentions really right up there so that we really know what's going on? I wonder about that. I mean, I'm concerned because if this is a go and this does well, like we were talking, are they going to, there going to be more facilities all around Groseal, and not just with Fresh Start, but other people might want to do the same thing. And residential areas are just that. They're for people just to live their lives. And, religious centers, I think, should be in another spot. So,
Thank you for your comments and questions. Additional hands. Who would like to speak, please? In the white coat, come on up, please.
Hi, Margaret Shelton, 8756 Bellevue. The Fresh Start team stated their retreats are spiritual. I find no mention of any prayer or spiritual discussion on their website or social media like Instagram. They have an Instagram page. While I have respect for anyone wanting to assist in the mental health field, I find it very disingenuous that the rabbi purchased a single-family dwelling home as a personal home purchase and turned it into a mental health treatment center for religious purposes. Now it's for religious purposes. So for your lawyer to state his client didn't think purchasing a single-family dwelling in a neighborhood of families would create concern really doesn't seem feasible. Stating that you're not having these retreats for addiction or serious mental illness requiring pharmaceutical support, yet your prior website had information to the contrary of what you have stated. Your new website does not mention prayer as well, nor does Instagram for that matter. Instagram seems to be primarily to request donations to subsidize the retreat that is approximately $7,000 per person and request donations for the other $7,000 per person. Having covered that, I'm curious if the men who spoke, including their lawyer, would be welcoming and happy to have a retreat center next door to their family home. I'm wondering if they would be okay to have one of their attendees, who is clearly so traumatized, so upset that she ran from the home, knocking on doors, begging for help, and to diminish that by saying, oh, it was only 10 minutes of time. Is that something you would embrace in your own family's neighborhood? I've heard and seen nothing that shows that this retreat is now suddenly a church, especially after 4 years of time. I've also seen conflicting information from the Fresh Start website that their pharmaceutical treatment was mentioned and then magically removed. I truly hope Groseal follows the law and acknowledges this home does not meet the zoning requirements for this facility, specifically as a church, based on the setback, and no variance should be approved. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next, please. There was a, yes, ma'am. Please come on up.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Johnson. I live at 9482 Waterman Drive. At one point, not in the city, I had a home business and I was looking for real estate purchase. And every house that I looked at, I looked at through the lens of, can I operate my business here? Is this allowed? That is the responsible thing to do when you're opening a business. The applicant said that any mental health diagnosis will not come into our program. However, trauma and abuse was mentioned many times. Most people with trauma and abuse have some type of anxiety or depression on a minimal level. Also, the staff, quite a few of the staff members were licensed social workers, not rabbis or spiritual directors. My last point is that calling it a church and not providing services to our community doesn't, I like the word disingenuous. It's a closed community to what they're bringing in from the outside. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Additional hands? Yes, over here, all the way on the left. Come on.
My name is Rhonda Macco. I reside at 8675 Ferry Road. I have children that get a bus at the bus stop, which is very, very close to this address that we're referring to. That in itself, I believe, speaks, more than anything. I'm sure anybody can attest to that. I'm sure everybody here is feeling the exact same way I am. And I would also like to know if they've had 250 clients so far and they've been running for 3 years, why are we here today? Why weren't we here 3 years ago? To me, that's a lot of tax dollars that this city should be handed over.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is James Johnson, and I live also at 9482 Waterman Drive. I just have one comment. No matter what they do or anybody else does, if I knew something like that was going on, why would I make an investment of buying a home next to something like that? I don't have much in this world, but my house and my family are what I have. Why would I put all of that money into a place next to an organization like that? I would not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sir. More hands. Let's see. Yes.
Good evening, Mike Pemberton, 8405 Burning Bush Road. I just want to make a couple of points. The first was something that the attorney had said regarding, I think the comment was something to the effect of any neighborhood could have somebody with a criminal background move into their neighborhood. And wouldn't that present the same problem, I think is what he was trying to say. I'll tell you, in a neighborhood, it's stable. You know who's in your neighborhood. I'm aware of somebody in my neighborhood with a felony conviction and a white-collar crime. Would I want to live next to that person? Or would I want to live next to a house where you roll the dice twice a month with 8 to 10 people who come from jurisdictions across the world? You can't even run backgrounds on these people. You're reliant on them to run their background checks. There's nothing else you can do. Check the sex registry for somebody coming in from another country. The sex offender registry. Go ahead. See if they're on the sex offender registry. I can do that in my neighborhood today, right now, and the people that I know that have been in the neighborhood for that amount of time. And the other thing I want to say is when I moved into my house 16 years ago, I had a 2-year-old, maybe a 1-year-old, and a 2-year-old, very young kids. To the last gentleman's point, if I was looking for a house, and I looked at a lot of them, and I knew that the house, we're down to our final 5 picks, and the one house is next to that place, I'm not buying that house. There's no way. I'm going to have my kids living next to a residence that has traumatized people, which is a very broad term, and I respect what they're trying to do. I would rather see them do it on 40 acres out in the country somewhere and not in a neighborhood where people live and they have their kids walking around. I would feel less comfortable letting my kids run around the neighborhood with something next door like that, because I couldn't live with myself if something did happen. And I knew that it was there, and you have to manage your risk. And I really feel for the people that live around that neighborhood. And, you know, I feel for them too if they go to sell their house, and you got to keep that from whoever you're trying to sell the house to, because if it's, the second you tell them, you know you're not going to sell the house. But thank you for your time.
Going around the room. In the middle. Yes, ma'am. What's that?
Tula Coklinaris, 22236
Yeah.
Harlan Drive.
And please get close to that microphone if you can.
I'm so Tula Coklinaris, 22236 Harlan Drive. I just want to know if this is the first such home that this company has run. Are we like a guinea pig? Are we an example for something they might do in another area, maybe not in Michigan or maybe somewhere else? Do they have some kind of a track record in terms of running a program like this somewhere else? And do we have any information on that? I'd also like to know what the neighbors immediately surrounding that home feel. Are they good neighbors to the neighbors that are directly behind them and across from them and such? So just a couple of questions for the petitioner. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Outside the door there.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Robert Sanchez. I live at 9293 Island Drive. And I just want to mention a few points. One is that I just went onto the website. I found out about 2 weeks ago. And they have a book recommendation list of 33 books. And if you look at those 33 books, 32 of them are all about like medical attention, and they have one book on there that mentions anything about spirituality. The other thing I would like to mention is that they mentioned earlier that there was one incident of, for lack of better words, an escapee, and they said that they addressed the problem. But from a different perspective, you could say that the escapee is actually the one who addressed the problem, who got out and made it public. So those are the two comments I'd like to add.
Thank you. Additional hands. Yes. Yes, sir. Come on up.
Good evening. Randall Lazuka, 8731
Close to the mic.
Thorntree Drive.
Thank you.
My concern is every time I see a for sale sign go up, am I going to see another church in there? How many times are these people going to expand? They've already bought another house on Thorntree. Are we going to set a dangerous precedent here by allowing this to go through? I think that's something that should be thought very carefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Justin Novak, 8566 Thorntree Drive. I just didn't feel like they had a good explanation of the way that they look at their applicants. It just sounded like he was just rolling off the top of his head. How I think that there's got to be like a set. You should be able to show it. Like, this is exactly what we go through to look at somebody that's coming into the place. It just sounded like they get recommendations and they talk to them, and if they feel like it's a good fit, they bring them in. It didn't seem like it was. It should be documented. It should be like this is exactly what we do. And that's
okay. Thank you. Additional hands. Yes. Come on up.
Hello. My name is Emily Graham. I live at 23301 Lowry. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to get emotional because I have been affected my family and I have been affected by the incident last January, and unfortunately, that poor young lady was the reason why this has been brought to light. I have 3 young children, and there's not a day that goes by that I could not let my kids play outside alone or not watch my oldest get off the bus without anyone being by her side, in fear that there would be another escaped patient, client, or however you would like to call them. I feel like this has been stopped and prolonged so this can be brought to a church rather than a business. And I think it's unfortunate for our community, for their business, and also for their clients and patients that they want to treat. With $7,000 a patient, the least they could do is a background check, but as they noted that they're doing flying people in and whatnot, and I don't even know where you would go to get information to gather those types of materials. But all I'm trying to say is that this is not and should not be allowed for our community, for the safety of the men and women and children that go on the bike path, for the little kids that fish on the bridge, for kids that are playing, for any man or woman, whatever trauma that these people, if there's another escaped patient, who they could attack or what's a threat. Sorry, I'm rambling. I've just had a lot of, it's been a tough year. So anyways, I hope you all and everyone else here realize what the big picture is here. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional hands? Yes, come on up.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Thank you. Elizabeth Renault, 21278 Meridian Road. So although I can understand why this center would want to be a part of our beautiful and primarily residential community, there's a reason that our master plan and zoning code has zoned this area as a residential area, and that this use is not a permitted use by right. Regardless if it does have religious affiliations, the applicant is currently running an unauthorized business within a residential neighborhood. The business aspect feels in conflict with the proposed church use. The church definition as a regular assembly for religious activity implies, in my opinion, that a reoccurring assembly of a group of population, not a transient paid treatment retreat. I believe there's a more appropriate proposed use that represents what's actually going on. Even as a religious nonprofit, $7,000 for the retreat services feels like it's leaning towards more of a mental health service and business rather than a true church use. Churches, I do not believe, are supposed to screen and exclude people for their services like this group is doing. Just because there are religious affiliations doesn't mean that it's a church. We're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, putting it in this church category. And like township staff said, because of the way that this went down, this is how we had to manage this situation. Where what we really should have happened, like staff said, we should really study if this is a use that we would even want to allow into our community, a retreat center as a use in the township, amend the ordinance in the correct way if so. This is a business that's been able to operate for 3 years while in violation of our township zoning code. The way that it was framed was that the property owners running this were not aware of any ordinance. Unfortunately, as a business owner, ignorance of the zoning law in our community does not negate the purpose and consequences of having the ordinances and zoning codes to begin with, and this potentially will set a precedent. All of the rest of the business owners on the island are expected to follow the zoning law. Understanding that this will most likely be tabled tonight to deal with a variance request at the ZBA, I'm not sure how the ZBA will be able to prove any sort of hardship, and I hope that no special thought will be given to the fact that it's already in use and operating as any sort of hardship. It feels somewhat as if we are going to try to make the use fit given the circumstances, which feels backwards, as the commission usually would be dealing with a true proposed use and not with one that's already in operation, asking for permission and not forgiveness. Thank you.
Additional hands. Any more folks that would like to speak? Any more speakers? Yes. Please come on up.
Guys, I had a couple of questions. Jennifer Johnson, 9482 Waterman Drive again. Have we done variances in the past on the island in the last 10 years? I don't know. And for what purposes? That was just my afterthought. Thank you.
Okay, any other hands? Oh, yes, sir.
Alexander White, 24509 Haley Crescent. I just wanted to present for the group a question. I know that the proprietor had said that he owns another home on the island, and perhaps I've heard there's another home in addition to that. I just wanted to submit to the group for consideration to perhaps investigate activities that are going down on at those homes as well. I've received, and again, those are rumors floating around the community, but I've received reports that there's additional retreat-like activities happening at homes that are owned by the proprietor as well. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you. Additional hands? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Dan Howe, 20678 East River Road. Just one quick question, how this is going to all go down. During the presentation, it indicated that it's going to be a matter of months that a ruling or will come down, probably mid-May or that type of thing. I was just wondering what's going to happen between now and mid-May. Is this facility going to be able to operate until we get some sort of ruling, or is the retreat center going to be suspended until a ruling can come down? Thank you.
Thank you. Additional speakers? Please, come on up.
Rhonda Macco, 8675 Ferry Road. I just find it real unclear where they have said that there was, where it was being overseen by people, and then where it wasn't. I mean, I'm just unsure. Is there somebody watching over this while these people are here, or isn't there? It was under well, they're speaking about what's going on. They're saying that there is supervision, but then they are saying that there isn't supervision. So I'm unsure of when these 5 people are there in the house. Is there supervision or is there not? Because they have said in various different parts that they were being supervised, and then at some points they weren't. So I'm not really sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional speakers? Way in the back.
My name is Gail Dell. I live at 21142 Knutson. Been here for 40 years. One great thing about Grosse Ile is it has been voted the safest community of Michigan for 40 years, I think. It's been safe. And that's one of the main reasons why I have not moved off to the island, even though my kids are grown and have kids of their own. But, this is a threat to safety. when you have transient people coming to the island, they're not doing background checks on these people that they're bringing in from all over the country and maybe all over the world. I mean, you have to have background checks. I wish we had background checks on the immigrants, the illegal aliens coming over our borders. You know, they're not even doing that, really. So I would love Grosse Ile to remain the safest community in Michigan. Another thing that I'd like to mention is the rabbi talked about how he loved Grosse Ile because of the water, and it's very calming. Well, that's true, but if you're a person who has trauma in your life, sometimes people with trauma love to, well, they have ideologies of suicide with water. In the last 40 years, there have been suicides around Grosse Ile. One time there was a man jumping off the bridge that they had a handcuff to the bridge before he actually, did commit suicide. Another time there was a person with mental problems that was on the canal. He was driving his boat up and down the canal furiously, and then finally he stood up on his boat and drove his boat into one of the small little bridges on Church Road, and he decapitated himself. And this affected the community. My kids were in grade school at the time, and when my kids came home from Park Lane Elementary, they were talking about how everyone was drawing pictures of a decapitated man with the severed head in the bottom of the canal. I mean, people with trauma should not be around water. I would think you wouldn't want a business taking care of people with trauma anywhere near water. So I guess I have to, my whole thing is about safety, transient people coming to the island that they're not doing background checks on. And honestly, I think they could get sued if they have one of their clients commit suicide jumping in the water when they're not looking, trying to commit suicide. I don't think anyone's ever realized that, but so thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional speakers? Oh, yes, all the way in the back.
Brianna Glovis, and I live at 833 LaSalle Court. So we have obviously known, those of us in the neighborhood have known about this for quite some time. And some of the information that was back on their website in April of 2023 is vastly different from what you'll see today. I understand this is a zoning issue, and obviously we know that they're trying to see that this is a religious dwelling. You go on their website and you look under their clinical providers, and you will see Ken Adams as their senior clinical and retreat supervisor. Anyone who knows anything about the medical community, me with a bachelor's in biomedical sciences applying for a doctorate degree, I know there's a very big difference between clinical and religion, and they are not very interchangeably used. He is known to use his practices for sex addiction and other personality disorders, and the most common cause of these types, or the most common course of treatment for these types of issues, are psychotherapy and medication that can be used interchangeably. Also, I'd like to mention that earlier he said that all of their retreat practices are done inside. Back in April of 2023, they had on their website, and I quote, "Biking and boating and campfires and music is what they have in store for retreaters." So it doesn't seem like all of these activities will be taken course inside, as they mentioned is incorrect. So I just wanted to shed some light on those things that have changed since they originally had their website. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional speakers? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Deborah Muzzin. I live at 28730 Coleman Drive. I'd like to know if this is the first time they've ever tried to open a facility, if they've ever been turned down, or if they've ever looked at other locations before seeking Roselle. Thank you.
Additional speakers? Anybody else want to address the commission? Any more hands? Okay, not seeing any more hands, then I'll bring it back to the table, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion from Raythel to close the public hearing.
Support.
From Eric, call the question. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
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 Motion carried. Public hearing is closed. Okay, we greatly appreciate all of the information that's come to us and questions and concerns, and we're going to run through those now. And Ross and Brian over there have been taking notes diligently, and we're going to start right at the top of the list. Brian or Ross, could one of the other of you lead us through this?
Yeah, I think we're going to probably try to tag team this one, Mr. Chair. So a lot of obviously great comments. Thank you all for attending. We were talking earlier, this is the most well-attended hearing we've had in many, many years. So I appreciate you all taking the time. I'm going to try to put together some questions out of this. A lot of comments, a lot of statements, fewer actual questions. But I'll do my best, and Ross, you've got some notes here too. So there's at least a few different comments / questions related to references on the applicant's website,
Yes.
some of which were noted as no longer being there. And it's a variety of things, but the general theme was related to medical care and treatment of mental illness. There was reference to psychiatrists on staff, questioning if those are the facilitators. We had another, I'm sorry, it was a little bit later, there was reference to psychotherapy and medication being used or dispensed. So that's a few different people, but that's kind of a general
There was
theme.
also a reference about the fact that the website in general focused on medical and not on prayer.
More so than, sure.
I think that's something that we'd like to hear from Lawrence. Are you going to speak for this topic?
Yes.
Yeah, obviously, people have done research, and they've looked out there and they've looked at that website, and the basic message is the website is sending a message which appears to be inconsistent with what we've heard tonight. And we'd like to see how those two are reconciled, if possible.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak once again to the commission. Do appreciate you all taking the time this evening. I sat on the planning commission myself for a number of years, so I know these meetings are long and you're not getting paid a lot of money to be here, so I appreciate your service. I suppose what I would say is, again, this issue of is it a medical facility? I mean, it's not even an opinion issue. It's a matter of fact. The state has looked into this. There is not treatment being provided of a medical nature. There is not any sort of, and when we use the word supervision, we mean that in regards to like you would see an adult foster care facility, or for example, that is permitted in this district as of right. None of that is going on at the retreat center. So again, rumor and innuendo are one thing, but they're not evidence upon which to base a land use decision. In terms of the website, again, what's on the website is information for prospective attendees. It's to just generally edify someone who might travel to the website and want a book to read or something like that. We heard about the book list, but that does not mean that everything you see on the website is happening or occurring at the retreat center. Again, we're limited to the evidence we have on the matter at hand, and certainly we've said it in a number of ways, and that's what the evidence points to, is that this is a religious facility. There is not medical treatment happening.
Does that website service any other functions within the organization besides Fresh Start?
Might get Rabbi up here to speak more to the website.
Now, I think it's important to really understand what appears to be a disconnect from what people are seeing and what people are hearing.
So to confirm what Larry said, there's no medical treatment. There are no psychiatrists on staff. There are no doctors on staff. There's no medicine being dispensed. None of that happens. None of that ever happened. We do have a variety of people that we work with, experts in a variety of different fields, that work with us in a variety of different capacities. I think the name Dr. Ken Adams was mentioned. Dr. Ken Adams is not on site at our program. There is, in terms of supervision, there were some comments that were made. We weren't referring to supervision of the participants. We're referring to supervision of the workshop facilitators. The facilitators are typically licensed mental health professionals with significant rabbinical training, so they wear a dual hat. But those are the only people that are on location, and those are the workshop facilitators. The 5 participants stay in the home on their own. They're all functional adults, as the individual you saw here tonight.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm perfectly clear in understanding this. The people that are listed on the website, the physicians and the experts in the various fields that were mentioned, they do not have contact with the actual
none
people who are at Fresh Start. They are resources. They are trainers for facilitators. The facilitators then are the people who manage the site. Now, is that a correct interpretation?
That is a correct interpretation. In addition, they provide other services for us, nothing to do with the retreat.
Okay, so there are other functions that outside of Fresh Start that they are supporting your business in.
That is correct. They provide
the nonprofit in.
Right. They guide us in training rabbis around the country. They guide us in training the Orthodox education system and a variety of other capacities and programs that we opened up. Nothing to do with the retreat, nothing to do with Grosse Ile.
So the fact that a person mentioned the fact that there was a specialist who helped with sex disorders, okay, listed on the website does not mean that
has nothing to do with our retreat. He happens to be an expert in a variety of fields. One of them, as indicated, is sex addiction, but that is not the use of his services for our
Fresh Start.
For Fresh Start, correct.
Okay. All right. This is an important point. Do any commissioners have any questions about this for any further clarification they'd like? Okay. Then let's sit tight. Let's hear what the next questions are.
All right, I'm going to take another stab at this one, and then my notes are getting thinner and thinner here. We'll defer to Ross. So there were at least a few questions, comments that were related to another use on Grosse Ile. Thorn Tree was specifically identified, and then there were more specific questions. Are they running additional retreats on Grosse Ile?
I can give you a short answer. The answer is no. And if there were, again, hypothetically, there is no plan to have additional retreat centers on the island. And if there were, they'd have to go through their own individual approval process. This is not something that, can spread.
Okay. All right. Please, no comments from the audience. All right. So, okay, an extension of that question was, do you have one of these facilities or more of these facilities in other communities?
No, we do not.
Okay. There was a question directed at, did you try to have any in another community and were turned down?
No, we did not.
Okay. So this is the one and only now, and you have no plans whatsoever for anything further on Grosse Ile at this point.
That is correct.
Okay. You do not own 3 houses.
I personally, Yochanan Polter, together with my partner, own the home on Meridian. A friend of ours owns the home on Thorntree, which we make use of from time to time personally, and we have no affiliation with any other home on the island.
Okay. Brian.
So the next one I had on my list, you've actually covered a couple more, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So there was also discussion a little bit about the idea of the background checks for the attendees, sort of that process. I know that's
Yeah,
already been-
you gave a rather extensive description of that. One comment was, why, is that documented somewhere? Is that something that could be provided to the community? That shows exactly what the steps are, how you do what you do.
I suppose we can provide a document. I'll leave that up to my attorney here.
Yeah, we have provided some documentation to the township in that regard. Certainly, could consult with my client and see what we'd be able to put together if it would, help everybody to have more evidence on which to make the land use decision. But yeah, again, with anything else that was going to be on this site, I mean, there's nothing else where you're going to go through this type of screening. Again, it's, adult foster care is a permitted use here, and this is certainly much more strictly tailored and screened than something like that would be.
Yeah, it's. I think it's fairly obvious that there in a number of these cases there's a fear factor here, plain and simple. Okay, that needs to be addressed with facts and documentation. And that's the way you answer these things. And so that's with the direction we would go with this specific screening process. I mean, the fact, the discussion about suicide, discussion about a person being afraid to have her child in the front yard. Now, again, would you restate again about the screening process and how you weed out people that do not fit either in the program or in the community for the reasons that the citizens are concerned about? Could you do that one more time, please?
Absolutely. Specifically, you mentioned suicide. All of those items are part of the intake checklist. If there were any attempts, if there's any insinuation that this individual is a risk, they do not come. If there's any past history of hospitalization, they do not come. If there's any active addictions or anything relating to that, they do not come. As I indicated, the gentleman that was here would be a classic example of a participant who comes. Any of the behaviors that were described would automatically disqualify a participant from attending our program.
Okay, well, I think that, if you could provide that checklist and really show the thoroughness of what it is that you do, that will go a long way to addressing some of the concerns. I think the original issue you raised was supervision, wasn't it? Did you get to that yet?
There was a question about, again, concerning the supervision when attendees are in the house.
Let's talk about this. Is it really supervision? What do facilitator? These are. I don't like the word supervision. Okay.
No, the supervision that we referenced was professional supervision of the workshop facilitators. The participants are not supervised. They do not need to be supervised. They're fully functional adults. There's a workshop facilitator on site. There's usually one or two extra people there, support staff, etc. Does that answers
So
your
on
question?
site is the facilitator. The facilitator is there, I presume, day shift.
Yeah.
Okay, what, 8 a.m. to?
8 to 5, 8 to 6.
Okay,
yeah.
and while that facilitator is there, these functions are being performed.
Correct.
Okay, with the attendees. Okay, at 5 o'clock after dinner or whatever, the facilitator leaves, and maybe at the discretion of the attendees, they may stay the night, they may not.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is the way this functions.
That is the way this functions, correct. Then they either leave the facility or they care for themselves, sleep, and the next morning starts over again.
Okay, let's play the what if scenario. Okay, the next session you have has a person who slipped through the cracks, much like that woman that we heard about, multiple times. Okay, is there a process by which that if a person decided it wasn't for them and they wanted to leave, that it won't result in someone walking through the neighborhood knocking on doors?
There absolutely is. We are staffed up to handle that and to facilitate a.
Please, quiet in the audience.
We have a process and procedure to handle that in a effective manner at this point.
Okay, so there is now a procedure in place?
Yes, there is.
Is that procedure not in place when this woman was having her
I wouldn't say it
difficulties?
wasn't in place. It was. Everything was prepared. We escorted her out to the car that was waiting to take her to the airport. And then unfortunately, she bolted. And that was an unfortunate occurrence, an unfortunate event.
The most important thing I'm concerned about here is if the person has a difficulty at 12 o'clock at night.
There are procedures in place.
There is a way
Absolutely.
that person can be
Yes.
directly addressed without difficulty, without interfering with neighbors or anybody else.
Yes.
Okay. All right. What is that procedure?
The procedure is twofold. Number one is prior to leaving. There's usually a staff member there after dinner, so that's 6:30, 7:30. Prior to leaving, the staff member will make sure that all the participants are proper in a good place and ready to either go home or go to their hotel or call it a night. In case something does come up, there are multiple emergency contacts. Not meaning 911, but other people, support staff that they can reach out to, that can that can deal with it and get over there if need be to handle it.
Okay, so there's somebody that person could call.
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
You actually have an on-call person.
Yes, we have an on-call person 24 hours a day.
On-call person who for the next 24 hours is sitting there,
Correct.
ready to answer the phone.
Correct.
If necessary.
Correct.
Okay, now that's the process. Is that documented? If it isn't, please provide it.
It's certainly documented and provided.
Brian?
Some folks spoke to the fact that individuals are paying $7,000 per visit, and kind of relating that to that this is functioning as a business. I wonder if the applicant could speak to that.
Okay, yeah, well, it's been discussed a bit before. The role of the business side of it, which is, $7,000 for an attendee to participate in this program versus the spiritual side, which is once you get there, okay, it's, okay, the balance between the two. I'm not even sure how to phrase a question out of that. But, because obviously cost is part of any function that you perform. Could you comment on that at least?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, Mr. Chair. This is a registered 501c3. There is not profit being made, so by definition, it is not a business. Someone can say it all they want, but that doesn't change the fact. Yes, there is a charge to help defray the cost of these, just as, if I was to send my daughter to church camp for the week, I'd pay a fee there. But that doesn't automatically convert the church into a business just because someone's paying a fee to defray the cost of a retreat.
A 501c3 is not considered a business? Is that what I heard?
It's a registered nonprofit.
A registered nonprofit?
Correct.
Okay, so the fees that are collected go into that 501c3 organization and are not profit driven.
Yep. It all goes to cover the costs and expenses of the organization.
Which would include staff, correct?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Rent to the owner?
That's basically it funds the entire Fresh Start organization. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Another question, Mr. Chair, is will the business continue to operate within the time frame between now and the determination?
Okay, that is not a question for the applicant. That's a question for the township. The up to this point, from the point where the township became aware of this, there was agreement made between the township and the applicant that they could continue to operate so long as they began the process of what we're going through right now. Okay, that is how we have progressed. Am I correct in that interpretation?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and barring anything unseen, I would anticipate that would continue. I'm not the expert and I'm not the authority, but that is the way the decision was reached to where we are tonight. You are continuing to operate. You are submitting the proper paperwork and following the process in order to get formal approval. So I could take it that far. I can't take it beyond this because, again, that's not my area of expertise. Would you care to comment any more on that, or are you?
Mr. Chair, I think you covered it to the extent that we can discuss it here.
Thank you. Okay, sir. Go ahead, Ross.
There were other questions regarding have we done variances and what for?
Okay, that's a question for Brian. Brian, discuss in terms of basically define a variance and at a high level the sorts of things that, for example, Zoning Board of Appeals sees all the time.
Yeah. So, yes, the township has heard and granted variances. The ZBA hears several variance requests every year. It's not unusual at all. Typically, they are, well, you only have the authority to hear dimensional or non-use variances. Typically, it's related to a setback for the most part, a single-family home that doesn't meet the required side or front yard setback, something to that effect. I mean, those are pretty commonplace. It is a completely different review evaluation than what the commission is used to. It does have its own set of standards. It is tied to essentially under law and under your ordinance, tied to what's called a practical difficulty, which takes into account whether or not the variance is needed to allow somebody to basically to use their property in a reasonable manner. Hopefully that helps, without doing ZBA 101 tonight.
The bottom line is that the variance process through the Zoning Board of Appeals is a standard process in the community and is routinely exercised. And the variance that is going to be required for this particular application is not any different than any other dimensional variance that the Zoning Board of Appeals sees 5 or 6 or 8 times a year.
Correct. And I would like to add too, I guess, just to sort of clarify the point that the ZBA doesn't set precedent. So it's just because if a similar variance was granted previously, that doesn't mean it's going to be granted again. Each variance request is reviewed on its own merits individually, not in relation to other variance requests.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? On the continuing to operate, I know we have township staff here that maybe did that. Can that just be explained a little bit more, either by Ross or by Kristen, or?
There's not a whole lot more to it than the chair has indicated. There was a discussion had with administration, and it was decided they would continue to operate until, so long as they were proceeding in good faith with submitting applications and coming to meetings and complying with requirements. It did take the applicant quite a bit of time to get their application together, but they were in regular contact with the township, let staff know where they were in the process, and so the decision was never made to revoke that permission to continue to operate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just clarifying point on that, right? So there's really 2 approval processes potentially, right? The variance is just a subset of a special land use in this particular case.
Yes. In simple terms, I think that's
So
yes is the correct answer.
So the question was, is the variance a normal process? The answer is yes.
Yes.
The second question is a special land use a normal process?
Yes.
And do all special land uses get approved?
No. They do not. It's a function of what's being asked for versus the standards that Brian laid out. Any application is gauged against those standards that Brian spent 15 minutes summarizing for us. Maybe it was 20 minutes. In any case, we make a decision based on the facts that are presented in front of us. So no, nothing is automatic. It's strictly applicant dependent. What else do you have over there? Brian?
Mr. Chair, I think there was one other, there's one other question that I heard that I'm not sure that I heard from them, and that was when the house was purchased, was it purchased with this use in mind, and was there an intent that the township would ever know about the use once the use started, whether that was the initial use intent or not?
Yeah, my understanding from the comments earlier is that this was not purchased with this use in mind. It was more.
Please show respect in the audience.
It was more of an organic process, the way that it all developed. And there were comments made about property taxes. This property has been paying property taxes, so there's that.
Jay, did you have any more questions on your list that we missed?
No, that was the only question. But if I could, you just kind of follow up. I think there's just to give you a chance to clarify. If I understood correctly, I think there was I think I understood from the previous statements. It was questioned. I think your answer is close to the answer, but at the time it was purchased, was it purchased for personal use, residential, normal, non-treatment use, and then that use moved at a later time? Is that what I understood?
Yes, it was purchased by myself and my business partner. I am the father of 6 children. He's the father of 5 children. We wanted a vacation home. We still use it often as a vacation home. And then this organically sort of showed up, and it just kind of grew from there.
How long between the purchase and the first time it was
About 6
used?
months.
Thank you.
Okay, did we miss any other questions or major comments that we need to review with the applicant? Anybody on their list have anything that we've overlooked? Yes, take one more look at your list, please, and let's make sure.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes.
Hi.
I'm sorry.
So there was a comment from the young lady over here. She made the point that religious retreats don't screen participants and decide who can and cannot come, at least in her experience. Whereas in this case, they've discussed at length how they screen their participants. So I don't know if they would like to address that, if they can.
Well, this is a more generic question. I really don't know much about religious retreats, but is it a common practice to screen people who attend these, or is that specific to the treatment that you are providing?
I can jump in a little bit on this, Mr. Chair. So I represent churches in the more traditional sense that I think a lot of people in this room would be more familiar with. We do advise them on things like retreats, and I can tell you that the majority of them do use some sort of screening process. And again, the reason why the screening process is additional here is for all the reasons we've been discussing tonight. So the answer is yes.
Okay. Yes, and simply more here, given the functions.
Correct.
Okay. Did you have any more on your list?
That was the only one that I had that I didn't think had been covered.
Okay. Well, very good. I think we've covered a lot of ground. All right. At this point, I'm going to bring it back to the table, and we're going to see if there are questions or comments or opinions that they would like to express, kind of sit tight. Okay, I'm going to start over here with Jay. We've have a wealth of information that we've learned tonight, both from the public and from the planner and from the applicant. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's, I really do appreciate the effort of the people who attended here tonight to, I know there's a lot of emotions involved with it and fear, and when I reference fear, I don't mean that is suggesting irrationality, right? I mean, there are reasons why we're fearful about things that we don't know, and we need to know more about them, and there are, and I think a lot of people have detailed some of the reasons for those fears, whether they're things that they've seen online or things that they've seen in the neighborhood. So I do appreciate everybody coming out, and I appreciate the fact that really kept it to a pretty professional level in the discussions here. We've seen worse about less emotional type issues. So I do appreciate all that. I appreciate the applicants and their counsels standing to take all the questions. And I think as we started the meeting, I think the end result here is that we're going to table this for it to go to ZBA and come back to us at a later date. But I do, having said that, we could have just kind of cut all this off and not done it. But I think it was still a good exercise for us to go through. It helped to get a lot of these questions and answers out. They no doubt will give rise to more questions, maybe follow-up questions, clarifying questions, things like that. But at least having the opportunity to have asked and answered or heard the answers to those questions could maybe formulate or help to formulate better questions in the next public hearing, which will be the ZBA, as I understand. So having said that, I think I believe that we would move to table this pending ZBA activity.
Thank you, Jay. Mr. Rathel, John.
I guess I have to say something.
No, not
First of all,
you're usually a man of a lot of words.
Yeah. First of all, mental health is not understood by most people in our society, and any families that deal with it realize the devastation that it has with family and friends and communities. When you add trauma to the mix, trauma is the unknown because everyone reacts different to trauma. And if you're wrong one time with a trauma patient, bad things can happen. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that in Oxford there was a trauma patient that took it to the extreme. I really applaud you for what you're doing, whatever that is within the structure of your organization that you set up to help people. Our society functions better when we as a group help each other. And I think with the, as a non-social media guy, I've always thought that social media has been the tool to separate and divide and not come together. So I really applaud your organization and others that I know some very well-known organizations that I actually contribute to help people. The problem that I see that exists here is when we talk about a trauma patient coming into a facility, and that facility is within a residential area where you have families and people that have spent their whole lives and many generations growing up in neighborhoods that have not been subjected to other activities within a neighborhood that can't be explained, whether it's a sex offender that's on a list that you can look up, or somebody that is a criminal that that has maybe served their time, but you have an idea. It's not fear. Fear, and Jay just said it. Fear can make it look like you're irrational and you're acting irrationally in a situation. I view this as great concern, because we all are concerned about our families, and the people that come to treatment centers are concerned about their families and their health, because I have been able to travel the world in my career and have met many people in many different countries and cultures, and we have all one thing in common, is we want to be loved, we want to provide for our family, we want to have a family unit that we can have in a joyful, confident approach of multiplying in a safe environment. That's what the world really wants. So we have something that has shown up, however long it's been there, doesn't matter. And I think that it's reasonable for people, when they hear that a patient, and we call them patients, or I don't know what we're calling them, but when somebody comes in to a facility and we hear that they're being treated for trauma, but they've been vetted so well that there's no fear of them ever doing anything, why are they going? I mean, what are the issues that people have that they need to be treated for of these trauma, even though that they've been gone through a process and vetted? I think it's reasonable for all of us, every one of us, anywhere, and grows anywhere, to ask, whoa, I mean, they can't be perfect people. We have to look out. We have to open our eye to what's going there, no matter how much planning is done. So it's a great concern. It literally is. So I'm going to stop with that, but I do want to address the next phase, okay? And this is where the rubber is going to meet the road. It's not going to be whether they have policies and procedures in place, and they're going to, they're going to have all that, right? You've heard the presentations. They did a wonderful job, and I believe everything that they said. I'm not questioning anything that they said. They have their positions, and that's great. But now we have to go through, and we have to get variances, and we have to get special land uses. Well, let me tell you something. Not too long ago, we just turned down a variance on a homeowner off of South Point that needed a variance of a zoning ordinance of A1E. We turned them down because there was no hardship of dividing their lot so that we could put another home there, right? I'm not in favor of making any recommendations today. If there's a motion that says I want to recommend to the ZBA, absolutely not. We made a recommendation in that case for them to approve this because it was an owner that had a big lot. It was 10 feet short or something of the R1E, and ZBA shot it down like that because it wasn't a hardship. Okay? We turn down these things all the time. All the time. So I appreciate and understand your concerns, and rightly so. And everybody would have these concerns because no one really knows exactly the scenario that exists. However, I would say to you all and anyone watching that wants to get involved with this, that the process of the ZBA is going to determine whether it's even going to come back to us, right?
It will come back regardless of the decision.
Or,
Special land use recommendation of the board.
and if the ZBA turns down the variance,
Yeah, we have to follow the process as laid out in the ordinance. Regardless of the ZBA decision, it will come back to this planning commission for site plan approval or denial, special land use approval or denial, as a recommendation of the township board.
and what's the ZBA going to rule on?
Setback variance.
And if they deny it, then what?
It comes back to us. Again, the same thing, same process.
Okay, so I think that's the process. Now, with that said, I got to tell you, there's other places on Groseal that place would like really work. Okay, I tell you what. Maybe you guys don't know this, but I'm the airport guy. Okay?
There's news.
And I got a perfect place for it. But that's a conversation offline. But anyway, there's a process that this has to go through, and you all need to be there and address your concerns. And there's going to be a number of opportunities to do it, and this is a long way off before there's going to be any approval for this to continue on in its current operation location. That's it.
Thank you, John. Angela.
I think I would like to, I think the two gentlemen here have addressed a lot of great points. I think I'd like to focus in on the fact that inherently, and if there's any truth in the advertising, it seems like a great concept. It seems like, we're treating folks who've gone through trauma, mental health, helping them tap into their religious beliefs. I think that's wonderful. Until I get to the $7,000 price tag. And then I have a really hard time. I've worked in and around nonprofit management in a previous life. And I think over the course of 3 years, 250 clients, to the tune of, $7,500 a week, each client, that's 1.8 mil. I mean, that's not chump change, and I think that's I struggle a lot to think in terms of what are we doing here? Are we helping people connect to the religious roots? Are we helping people get through trauma, or are we just giving them a really nice place to crash for 7 days, pray, do yoga, look at the water, recreation? In that case, I see it more of an Airbnb. I was looking at Torch Lake not too long ago. I can go there for $5,000 for a week, bring lots of books and my yoga mat and pray. I'm struggling a lot. I think it's a very loose interpretation of the code that protects churches and religious beliefs. I think, judging by the fact that they've had an inordinate amount of time to get in front of us, they've had a lot of time to put those pieces together. And really realistically, if we're treating folks who've gone through trauma in their life in any form, we need to take a look at the folks who can't afford $7,500 a week and reach out. So that part bothers me inherently above all else. And the overnight piece bothers me because we don't know who's in and out of there, and I don't know how the neighbors have dealt with it up to this point. And I think lastly, we are all neighbors, all in this room, including the gentleman, the petitioner for tonight. And one of the things about being good neighbors is connecting within the community. That's the best part about Groseal, is getting to know my neighbors and the folks that I live in and around. And, the fact that we're even having to talk about a requirement to bring in 7 trash cans the next day, it blows my mind. Like if I were a neighbor looking at 7 trash cans for longer than a day, my neighbors would say something. They would come check on me. They would do a well check, make sure that I'm okay. That's absurd. So the fact that we even have to talk about a requirement, that bothers me as well. So, and that's all I have to say about that tonight.
I mean, we're talking a lot about whether this is a church or not a church, and at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter, right? Not all churches would be granted special land use. And one of the things I look at here against variances and setbacks and everything else is this compatible with adjacent uses? And adjacent uses are private homes. This is a residential neighborhood. Whether or not it's a church, it's a retreat facility, bringing in unsupervised or maybe supervised guests from around the world on a weekly basis. So I don't think this has a fitting within compatibility with adjacent uses. So whether we have to go through ZBA before we come back here, or whether we do a motion tonight, that'll be up to the board. But those are my 2 cents.
Eric? Kyle?
I don't have, well, I guess not too much more to add tonight, just mostly grateful to everyone for coming out, for the comments that were made, grateful to the applicant for coming forward and doing what they did. A lot of this is imperfect. I know I wish that this had been brought forward when this was initially thought up, and we could have planned for this in a better way, but we're here now. So this is the process we're going through. I know it's not perfect for everyone, but it's the beginning of getting some of the transparency that I know a lot of folks were concerned about. I know I learned a lot tonight, both from the applicant and also on our end from the township side. So yeah, I'm going to be following this closely, following to see what ZBA does, and again, grateful for everyone for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Kyle. Well, I'll echo those sentiments. This is a business-like meeting, and it's all because of the manner in which you provided us the input, and that's greatly appreciated. As far as moving forward, because our ordinance requirements are to make a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals based on the test for practical difficulty, which has not been evaluated by the township staff, nor has the information been provided by the applicant, primarily because we have not asked to this point for that information. We're going to table this application tonight with the expectation that we'll bring it back to this commission on May the 16th. In the interim, we request that the applicant provide the information supporting the demonstration of a practical difficulty, okay, in the strict application of the ordinance, and that the township that following submittal of the applicant's information, the staff begin its evaluation, so that we'll have basically the ZBA criteria for the township ordinance review. Keep in mind, this commission has never reviewed an application against the standards of a zoning board of appeals. They're totally and completely different, okay? And so what this will in effect be, when the applicant is submitting and presenting this information to us, we will evaluate it as though we are a zoning board of appeals. That will be our basis for our recommendation to that body, okay, which we are required in the ordinance to provide. So it'll be a learning process for us because, again, as a planning commission, we've never been there. So that will be something to look forward to, and I'm sure, Brian, you'll be speaking with the applicant to make sure that they can be properly prepared to present their best case forward.
Of course. Can I just jump in real quickly?
Yes,
just
please.
One quick clarification. I appreciate everything you said. It was spot on. The anticipated meeting date back to commission would be May the 6th, as opposed to the 16th.
Oh, okay, May 6th, sorry. Okay, thank you. All right, so before I entertain a motion to table this application, I'd like to get any further comments or questions. Anybody have anything further to say? All right, on that basis, I entertain a motion to table this application until the May 6th Planning Commission meeting. Is there a motion? Motion from Jay, support?
Support.
Support from Kyle. Call to question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried. The application is tabled. So at this point, we will get back to our agenda with 2 or 3 other items and be able to finish this meeting. Thank you. We'll take a minute while everybody clears the room.
cell phone?
I have too many to keep up with. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute recess, folks.
I was gonna go, I went down.
cover. The first is the Planning Commission meeting schedule. You have a series of dates where the Planning Commission may choose to meet. This is a requirement of the Township Board. I would entertain a motion to approve that list of dates. Motion from Jay, support?
Support?
Support from Kyle. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Kyle, we'll get you off the hook with the Township Board now, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item. It is public comment. There's nobody else in the room, so we'll go past that. We have in the package the 2023 Planning Commission Annual Report. I don't believe there was anything that we needed to do specifically with that, was there? It was just for information purposes of the things that have gone on that will be included in the Township Annual Report. We've done a lot of work in this year, so that's good. I have one other item in the chair's report. I was talking with our secretary, Jim Davis, and he advised me that he was not going to re-up this year to stay on the commission. Jim has been with us for 18 years. He's played a valuable role, both here in public meetings, but in the private sessions, concept review meetings that we have with applicants to get everybody squared away, and he will be missed. I would entertain a motion to express our appreciation to Jim for his 18 years of service.
I move that we don't accept his resignation.
I tried.
I didn't know that was allowed, yeah.
Believe me, I tried. But all in favor?
Of not accepting it?
No.
No, I move that we thank Jim for his 18 years. It's not a very long time on this commission, but it's a long time. So I appreciate everything he's done.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Do we need to make a motion to replace him with the guy to your left right now for the?
We do need to hold a vote. I was going to actually do that at the next meeting.
Well, we might as well get it done now. Yeah, we might as well get it done now while he's there, unable to.
All right, we can do that until we actually have the formal votes here, I think in June. I don't remember. But, okay, how about a motion?
I make a motion that we
Mr. Chair?
assign Eric, it's not
You would have to do that tonight so that it would go to the township
Yeah.
board for
We have to
approval.
nominate chair and all that, yeah.
Yeah, I knew that, Ross. That's why I'm doing it right now, so.
Okay.
It's like, to nominate Eric Ranka as Secretary of the Planning Commission Executive Board.
Second.
Can't.
Any further nominees? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Condolences, sir.
You don't have anything else
we
to
have
do.
We have the vice chair now. We have to vote on that too, according to Kyle over here.
I
I'll
make a
nominate
motion.
Jay.
Oh, all right, I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Definitely aye. Okay, and
And I'll-
probably
I'll
probably
name-
least is me.
I'll nominate the best person to run any kind of a meeting, let alone a contentious public meeting.
I nominate
As
that
the,
John
as the
Schweikart
chairman.
is chair of every commission and committee on the island, except the Commerce Park Commission.
All right.
I like Ron.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. All right, on that note, I think we've satisfied the board.
Yes.
Letters from them?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay, then on that note, I'll entertain a motion to
I move
adjourn.
to adjourn.
Support?
Favor, aye.
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 Meeting adjourned.